Top of the hour, I'm Kate Baldwin. Thank you all so much for being here. At this hour, it is not clear which party will be in control of Congress for the next 2 years. Let's just get that out of the way right now. But results are coming in. We made a projection last hour. There are several of the close races that we are tracking still have not been called. Right now, Republicans, in terms of the balance of power in Washington, Republicans hold 49 Senate seats. Democrats, 48 Senate seats. 3 races are still undecided. And let's look at those races. Arizona is one of the keys. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, he's currently leading his Republican challenger, Blake Masters. And then in Nevada, Republican Adam Laxalt holds a narrow lead over Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. And in Georgia, Senator Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, they are back on the campaign trail. They are headed to a runoff. Again, this all happens next month. Now, let's look at the House. The Republicans inching closer to retaking the majority, but right now we have to say it is far from a done deal. Nearly 36 races remain undecided. President Biden, his take on all of it, he says the results represent a good day for democracy as his party avoided an expected Republican blowout, though we still will see if Democrats or Republicans remain in the majority in the House especially. We are covering all of this for you with reporters in key states throughout this hour, and John Berman on those undecided races here with me in studio in the Senate especially. All right, what are you seeing this hour?
Well, one thing I just want to make abundantly clear is not only do we not know who will control the Senate, we don't know when we will know, right? These are the races that are still undecided. Georgia's going to a runoff in December, that much we know. Nevada and Arizona, well, let me show you what happens. Right now, you have a Republican ahead in Nevada, a Democrat ahead in Arizona, but if the Republicans happen to win both these states, they get 51 seats. They control the Senate. The runoff in Georgia doesn't impact that. However, the Democrats are ahead in Arizona. If they happen to also win Nevada, then they have 50 seats. Kamala Harris would break the tie, and they maintain control. So either of those scenarios are possible. It's especially possible given how close those races are right now in both Arizona and Nevada. Let's take a close look at where things stand in Nevada. 15,000 votes separate Adam Laxalt from the incumbent Democrat, Catherine Cortez Masto. His lead has shrunk overnight as there was more mail ballot counted from Clark County and also from Washoe County. We think there's about 135,000 votes left. That is an estimate. That's what CNN thinks the estimate currently is left in Nevada. If Catherine Cortez Masto can win 60% or maybe even a little less than 60% of that, she could overtake Adam Laxalt. And in Arizona, the situation is almost the reverse. You have Mark Kelly, the Democrat, ahead by 95,000 votes. Blake Masters, the Republican, he is behind. That was closer last night, but there were new ballots counted, or there were ballots that were counted in Pima County right here last night, also in Maricopa County right here. Mark Kelly's lead grew. There are 560,000 votes remaining, roughly, in this state. That's a lot of vote left, predominantly from Maricopa County, but also a bunch from Pima County. The trick will be, what does this vote look like? The vote that was processed yesterday, it's skewed toward Mark Kelly, but we've seen in the past some of the late arriving mail vote in Arizona has skewed toward the Republican. Not impossible with that much runway, 560,000 votes for Blake Masters to make up that 95,000 vote margin, Kate.
All right, John, we'll see you in just a second. Stick with me if you would. As you just heard from John, though, Arizona election officials, they're still counting ballots at this hour, with both the Senate and governor's races yet to be called. Sarah Seidner there in Phoenix for us again this hour. Sarah, what are you tracking? Who are you talking to? What are they telling you?
We are talking to county officials who are showing us that the vote is happening right now. Yes, they are counting away, counting all of those ballots. We know that there are 560,000 ballots still yet to be counted in the entire state, but the bulk of those, 400,000 to 410,000, are right here in Maricopa County. You see that the election workers are diligently doing their jobs at this hour. There is a huge load of ballots that has just gone through the machine. You see the young woman putting those ballots in a box. So those ballots have gone through the tabulation machines, and we will hear in the evening our time around around 6 p.m. Arizona time, 8 p.m. your time, new numbers, the new tabulations from some of those early votes. And then eventually, once they get through some of those 400,000 votes, as we get closer and closer to Friday, Saturday, we're expecting to have about 95% potentially of all of the votes counted, and it will give us a much better idea just how close these cases are and if someone is a clear winner. Back to you guys.
Sarah, thank you so much. We are also, of course, still waiting for the vote count in Nevada to be completed. Right now, Republicans hold a narrow lead in both the Senate and governor's races there as well. Neither contest has been called. Rosa Flores there for us in Las Vegas. Rosa, how are things going there?
Well, Kate, I've been doing some math since you and I talked because we've been talking about how we don't know how many mail ballots are out there, how many outstanding ballots are out there. What I can tell you, based on our latest news gathering and editorial, we know that there are at least 100,000 ballots that officials say that they have in their possession that are being processed but are not reflected in the results yet. Here's the breakdown. We know that in Washoe County, there are about 20,000 ballots, and these are election day, drop box, and mail-in, that they are still processing. They're still working through those to count them, and the results are not reflected yet in the totals. And then there's Clark County. We know of at least 80,000 ballots, and these are election day, drop box ballots, mail-in ballots, ballots that still need to be cured, and also provisional ballots. And again, these are not reflected yet in the totals, but officials tell us that the biggest thing here in Nevada, Kate, is that they don't know how many are outstanding, and that's because all 0.18 million of registered voters, unless they opted out, they received a ballot in the mail, and so long as that ballot it was turned into a mailbox on election day, postmarked, it could be counted until Saturday. Kate?
Until Saturday. Rosa, thank you so much. All right, so control of the Senate. It may come down to, well, there's lots of factors, but definitely one state is a factor. Georgia, again. Both parties are bracing for what will, of course, be a tough runoff next month between Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker. Eva McKend is live in Atlanta for us. Eva, what are the candidates saying is right now they have to kick back up into campaign mode?
Yeah, well, Herschel Walker will campaign later today, this evening with Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Walker really enjoying the full weight of support of the Republican establishment. Senator Warnock will hold a news conference in about an hour here in Atlanta. What we're seeing on the ground is Georgians sort of digest this all, digest the reality that Georgia could potentially be in a place again where the state could determine the balance of power in Washington. What we're also seeing, Kate, is just money pour into this state. The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, they are a key fundraising operation for Senate Democrats. They have pledged $7 million to boost Senator Warnock, and that is going to go to field organizing, really to help get out the vote. For his part, Walker getting a boost as well, more than $1 million from an anti-abortion group. You know, Georgians actually don't have all that much time. It's just about 4 weeks till this runoff. But what we're learning from the Secretary of State is actually just 2 days after Thanksgiving will potentially be the first day that the early vote starts in this state. Kate?
It's good to see you, Eva. Thank you. So President Biden, he is definitely bolstered by the midterm results and the red wave that did not materialize, declaring the election a good day for democracy. But if Republicans win control of the House very clearly, his agenda faces big challenges. Jeremy Diamond is live at the White House for us. Jeremy, White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield, she was on with us just last hour and talking about the midterms. They clearly feel vindicated. But just like everyone else, they don't know yet what kind of Congress that they're going to be dealing with yet.
Yeah, that's right, Kate. And listen, there has been this triumphal mood at the White House since yesterday. You heard some of it reflected in what the president said as he talked about no Democratic president in decades having lost fewer seats than he is expected to lose in the House. But the White House is also very clear-eyed about the fact that it is likely, more likely than not, that they will have a Republican House to deal with. And that is also something that was reflected, perhaps not directly by the president, but when you heard him talking about the fact that he was speaking with the House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy yesterday. And then he also talked about the ways in which he is willing to potentially compromise with Republicans and also the red lines that he's drawing.
And I want to be very clear. Under no circumstances Will I support the proposal put forward by Senators Johnson and the senator from down in Florida to cut or make fundamental changes in Social Security and Medicare? That's not on the table. I will not do that. I will veto any attempt to pass a national ban on abortion, but I'm ready to compromise with Republicans where it makes sense on many other issues.
And listen, Kate, the president didn't lay out exactly which issues he would be willing to compromise on, but just the fact that he's talking about that shows that the White House acknowledges this political reality, that they are likely to face a Republican House and everything that comes with that, including increased oversight, investigations into the administration and potentially the president's son as well, and more broadly, a power-sharing situation that this White House has not yet had to deal with. Now, the last thing that we also heard President Biden talk about yesterday was the successful exercise of democracy. And today, President Biden is expected to address DNC staffers at Howard Theater this afternoon. That will be one topic that he addresses today. Kate?
Jeremy, it's good to see you. Thank you for bringing us that. So, as we were just discussing, the votes are being counted still in several states. Control of Congress yet to be determined. What could come in next? What could today bring? That is next. The midterm elections are officially in overtime, friends. Votes still being counted in several key races that will decide control of Congress. Georgia's Senate race is heading for a runoff again next month as Republicans are inching closer to winning a majority in the House. Joining me right now to discuss with the man with all the answers, CNN political director David Chalian, senior political analyst Kirsten Powers, political commentator Scott Jennings, and John Berman, kind enough to stick back with us. David, where is your focus when it comes to kind of everything that is outstanding right now?
My focus is on resolving this election. That's where my focus is.
What a novel idea, David.
Yeah. Specifically, in terms of what is left outstanding, of course, in the battle for control of the United States Senate, particularly focused on Maricopa County in Arizona, the Phoenix area, that largest county, because what I'm really looking to see there, as I'm sure John was discussing with you, is sort of the pattern of the vote that comes in when we get another batch of votes from there today. What we learned in the last two election cycles is that the pattern is not always the same. In 2018, a lot of those late arriving ballots that were dropped off on Election Day actually benefited the Democrat Kyrsten Sinema. In 2020, that Election Day drop-off piece of the equation was a very heavily pro-Trump vote and made Biden's wide advantage in Arizona remarkably narrow. I mean, he won it by, I think 11,000 votes or something like that, maybe a bit more than that. So I'm watching that. And in Nevada, everything I'm speaking to Democrats and Republicans, our analysts at our decision desk, everybody is waiting to understand the nature of these votes that are in these drop boxes that were dropped off on the day of the election. It is like a black box to everyone right now. We just do not know the nature of those votes inside those drop boxes. That will give us as clear a picture as possible going forward in Nevada.
That's so interesting. And Scott, you are focused in Nevada. You're talking to people on the ground. What are you hearing?
The Laxalt campaign is really focused on this one drop box situation with 57,000 votes. They referred to it this morning to me as the ball of wax, the whole ball of wax. And if that doesn't come in for Cortez Masto the way last night's batch came in, then they feel like they've got it. And they don't think it will. Now, the Democrats, I know, are arguing that those might be culinary union votes, the old Reid machine, and that it, in fact, might deliver. The Republican rebuttal is, no. It was raining. There's a whole bunch of votes in that box of people who are probably Republicans that didn't want to stand in line. So the war of spin between the campaigns is really kind of fascinating. And I guess sometime today we'll find out who's right.
We will find out. Yeah, someone's going to be a genius in all of this, right? As we always say. And the impact of weather is something to never be discounted when it comes to an election, for sure. John, can you give us a little background on what you're seeing in terms of the votes coming in, what happened yesterday, and what you're looking at?
Just to focus on what Scott was just saying there, this is Clark County. You can see Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent Democrat, has a lead of almost 6 points. They're 5.5 points. The votes that were processed and released last night, it was 14,000 votes from Clark County. And of those, the Democrat, I'll put a D there, Catherine Cortez Masto, she won 65% of those. That's a big percentage for her. She was able to net votes there. And the question is, are Scott's sources with the Laxalt campaign right? Will it be a much lower margin or maybe even Republican votes? When we get more of the Clark County vote, we think there may be anywhere from 80 to 100,000 votes left in Clark County. Again, these are estimates. We just don't know. But if you're Catherine Cortez Masto and you can get 60%, not even 65% of the vote there, you probably can make up this margin of 15,000 votes. That's why, as David Chalian, and I defer to him on, let's be honest, everything, is 100% right, that we need to know the makeup of this vote, and we just don't yet.
The good news is we will at some point, everyone. We will. Just stay here. Never leave, ever. Let's talk about another one of very important states that we're watching, the runoff in Georgia. Kirsten, the impact of presidents current and past on this runoff is something that a lot of people are kind of analyzing now. I had Kate Bedingfield on from the White House saying that when it came to Warnock, the president would do whatever Raphael Warnock wanted. If that meant, obviously, stay away, he's clearly not going to go. If he would like him to come, maybe he will. There's also then, some of the Republican Party taking a look at the impact of the former president, Donald Trump, saying they would really like him to push back his 2024 announcement until that runoff wraps. What do you think the impact of all of this is?
Well, I think there's no question that Donald Trump has had an impact on this race in terms of the person who is representing the Republicans in it, and it's somebody who Trump has, really very much been behind. And so I don't think there's any question that he's impacting it. Of course, the governor who Trump despises, the Republican governor, won, running away. And so a lot of people, I think a lot of Republicans were hoping that that was going to boost Republicans voting, in the Senate race. And it looks like there were a lot of ticket splitters here. So what happens in a runoff when you don't even have somebody at the top of the ticket who is actually bringing Republicans along? And so it doesn't particularly bode well for Republicans. And I think that Biden's approach here is exactly right. It's not really the way Donald Trump thinks, though, right? So he's not somebody who's necessarily willing to step aside for the good of the party or, really anybody else other than what's good for him.
Out of the corner of my eye, I can see Scott raising his eyebrows to that in full agreement. One race, David, that I have been tracking, and I know that I've been bending your ear on quite a bit, is Colorado's 3rd congressional district. This is Lauren Boebert's district. Challenging her is former city councilman Adam Frisch, and he's posed a very serious challenge to Lauren Boebert. He's said that all along that what he's been running against is her brand of angertainment in Washington that's done little, he says, for the people of the district. John Berman, before we get to David on that, you've been looking at this as well. How close is this race right now?
Well, I actually have to tell you, I just looked at it for the first time in a couple hours, and for the first time, Lauren Boebert is ahead there. Up until the last time I checked.
What was it, like 64 votes difference, right?
Adam Frisch was, I think it was 64 votes ahead. Now you have Lauren Boebert ahead by 386 votes. That might not seem like a lot, but it's 5 times what the margin was in the other direction yesterday. I wish I knew where that vote was coming in from. The county level here, Pueblo County is the largest county that leans Democratic. It's a D+1, D+2 district. There's still only 83% reporting there. So if you're a Democrat, there's still hope that Breonna Keeler called this county yesterday, and there were 2,000 votes still outstanding from this county as of yesterday. I'm not sure where this new batch came in from that now is giving Lauren Boebert the lead. I will tell you, this is interesting. I was not expecting this. I had checked this not long ago, and Frisch was ahead. Now, new votes actually reported. Lauren Boebert has taken the lead.
Yeah, and so, David, what do you see in this race? Because you've got Lauren Boebert facing a real challenge. We've also got Marjorie Taylor Greene, that brand of Republican, seeming to be gaining more strength within the Republican caucus at the very same time. Does this race and what we see here suggest otherwise?
Yeah, I wish we could sort of put truth serum into Kevin McCarthy's arm and say, hey, you're going to have a narrow majority no matter what, so you're going to have this headache. So do you have a preference about the outcome of this race if you have one less rabble-rouser in that sort of wing of the party trying to exert leverage? But here's the reality, Kate. I don't think we can learn huge, broad lessons from a single congressional race. There is no doubt that Lauren Boebert comes from a wing of the party that with a narrow Republican majority in the House, if that's where we end up, Kevin McCarthy is going to have to constantly be negotiating with, constantly be deal-making with in order to get anything done. I mean, that's the reality of a narrow majority for any speaker, is that every vote becomes really, really important as you're trying to pass the agenda. So I'm not sure we can say, and we don't know how this race will come out, if Lauren Boebert, who's now leading, as John just showed, if she ends up losing this race, I don't know that you can draw a huge national conclusion here, but it will be interesting in terms of the composition of the Republican conference.
Absolutely. And this race is one of many that we're seeing right now, that the line of every vote counts. It really does when you're looking at that, when the difference between them was 64 votes at one point. Let's see if it expands or tightens up. We will see. It's great to see you guys. Thank you so much. So a programming note for all of you. Former Vice President Mike Pence, he will be joining Jake Tapper for a live CNN town hall next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. The Dow up right now. Just take a look at that. Up big on the news that inflation is cooling, but prices, they're also still up. We're going to go over the numbers, what it means. It's next. Over 300,000 customers are without power in Florida after a rare November hurricane made landfall this morning. Nicole, now a tropical storm, is still hitting the state with heavy rain, big winds. Layla Santiago is back with us live in Florida. Layla, what are you seeing now?
Kate, last time I checked in with you, I was in South Daytona. We are now on Daytona Beach, and take a look at the big problem here, which is flooding. What you're going to see off in the distance is the International Speedway Bridge, which has been shut off. And so there is no access to that barrier island here in Daytona Beach. That's an area that, by the way, is still being evacuated, where the county has told us there are dozens of buildings that have been deemed unsafe, and they're correlating that to coastal erosion. So let's walk down here and show you sort of another angle so you can see the problem when it comes to the flooding down here. Not only closing down roads, washing out roads and closing bridges, but take a look down on this side. You can see just by that car there how high the water is. I spoke to one gentleman who said he left here this morning. He just checked on his business, which is on this street, and he has 2 feet of water inside. So a lot of flooding that we're seeing here. And one other pretty big update that just came in as well announced that the death toll now associated with Tropical Storm Nicole. They have reported 2 deaths as a result. Kate?
Layla, thank you so much for that update. We will stick close to this. Let's turn now to the economy, though. U.S. stocks way up at this hour after an inflation report was better than expected. It shows inflation easing from that 4-decade high we've been tracking for so long now, while the Federal Reserve is still working on trying to tame stubborn inflation. Matt Egan's back with us with more on this. Matt, how big of a deal is this report?
Kate, this is a big deal. I mean, inflation isn't gone, but it is cooling off, and it's cooling off more so than people expected. One of the interesting things out of this report is that core inflation, which strips out food and energy, that actually unexpectedly got cut in half month over month in October. That was significant. Year over year, 7.7% increase in prices. That is not good, but everything is relative. This is a 9-month low, and it is big improvement from June when we saw consumer prices go up by more than 9%. We saw outright price declines month over month in October for apparel, airfare, used cars, fresh fruit. And Moody's economist Mark Zandi told me that he thinks that today's report suggests that even though inflation is still painfully high, it is, quote, definitively moderating. And Zandi says as long as oil prices don't go crazy or China doesn't resort to really extreme lockdowns, then he thinks that inflation should be, quote, much lower a year from now, which would obviously be great news. Now, Wall Street is loving this. The second that this report came out, we saw stock futures skyrocket. Dow up by about 800 points, around 3%. The S&P 500 up 4%. The NASDAQ is spiking 6%. You don't see that every day. This would be the best day for Wall Street in over 2 years. The hope is that all of this gives the Fed a reason to stop slamming the brakes on the economy. These massive interest rate hikes are raising the risk of a recession. They're also raising borrowing costs. Yesterday, we learned that credit card rates hit record highs. Mortgage rates today, we learned, are back above 7% at a 20-year high. So hopefully this inflation report gives the Fed a reason to stop with the rate hikes.
All right, it's good to see you, Matt. Thanks,
Kate.
Really appreciate it. So voters in Georgia facing another huge and consequential runoff next month. Will Biden and Trump campaign there to try to boost their Senate candidates? Do the candidates want them to? We'll discuss that next. The Senate race in Georgia heading to a runoff after Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and his Republican challenger Herschel Walker, they failed, either of them, to get over 50% of the vote. What this means is Georgia voters will have to return to the polls next month to pick the winner. And in a very real case of deja vu, this race could decide which party takes the Senate majority. Joining me now for more on this is Patricia Murphy. She's a political reporter for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It's good to see you. Georgia voters have become quite familiar with runoffs in recent time, for sure. What are the lessons learned from last year's runoff, and what do you think it means for this one?
Well, our runoff that we had in 2021 was totally unprecedented. It was a 9-week slog, really, for two of our U.S. senators who were Republicans at the time running against Democratic challengers. And with Donald Trump, who had just lost in 2020, coming down and making himself a near constant presence in Georgia right before the 2021 elections. Obviously, both of those Republicans lost. Donald Trump had a big rally the night before those two runoffs and talked mostly about himself and talked about how he was going to primary Governor Brian Kemp because he was super mad at him, as well as Brad Raffensperger. You know, fast forward nearly 2 years, and we have Donald Trump still angry with Brian Kemp, but Brian Kemp is the most popular Republican here in the state. He won by a lot on Tuesday night. And so the big question is, will Herschel Walker, who is up in this runoff, will he bring Donald Trump in for him or continue to keep him away, as that Walker campaign has done? It did not help win a runoff in 2021, and it doesn't look like it would help in 2022.
And you mentioned Kemp. I mean, not having the popular Republican governor on the ballot, what do you think that does for Herschel Walker now in the runoff?
Yeah, I think it's a problem. There was a lot of hope among Republicans that Governor Kemp would finish by such a huge margin, over 50%, that he could drag Herschel Walker over that finish line. There are a number of Georgia voters, Republicans, who voted for Governor Brian Kemp who did not vote for Herschel Walker. But the governor has a huge ground game. He built up his own ground game outside of the Republican Party apparatus, turned on that switch, got all of his voters out to the polls, which he said would help all of the other Republicans on the ballot. That helped everyone except Herschel Walker win without a runoff. Now, when Walker is out there by himself on Election Day in that runoff, he's going to need that kind of ground game that Governor Brian Kemp was able to flip on, but it won't be Kemp's operation anymore. So that was a big boost for every other Republican on the ticket. It wasn't enough to get Walker over the finish line, though, and so he's going to need to go back to the drawing board. But it will hurt him, absolutely, that Governor Kemp isn't on the ticket with him to help him get over the line.
And Patricia, there's already so much money pouring into Georgia now with the runoff underway. The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee announced a $7 million field organizing investment to boost Warnock. An anti-abortion group announced that it's going to spend at least $1 million in the race to attack Warnock's position on abortion. What is the money game going to look like here?
So I can tell you so far in this Senate race, Raphael Warnock outspent Herschel Walker by more than $60 million and still ended up tied with Herschel Walker. So there is a point at which all the money you throw at this race isn't going to make sure that you have won. We had more than $500 million come into the state for those runoffs in 2021. Eventually, all those ads just canceled each other out. People stopped paying attention. But if the money goes into a ground game, if the money goes into delivering those voters to the polls, which you really have to in a runoff because people just aren't paying attention the same way, then that's money well spent. But in terms of all of the money flooding in for an air war, that tends to start to just get completely tuned out. They need that money on the ground. Herschel Walker especially needs that money on the ground because that was an operation that Kemp had stood up before.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Patricia. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Coming up next for us, exclusive new CNN reporting on what the United States observed Russia doing that has national security officials concerned. Details in a live report next. Now Now to exclusive CNN reporting. The United States observed the Russian Navy preparing for a possible test of a new nuclear-powered torpedo. A successful launch could inflame an already volatile situation, of course, between the United States and Russia. My colleague Jim Sciutto has this new reporting, and he joins me now from Washington. Jim, why is this so concerning to national security officials here?
Well, to begin, it's just a fearsome weapon. It's described as a torpedo. It's really an underwater drone. It's nuclear powered, so it has, in effect, a limitless range around the world. It's huge, as you can see there. It's designed to go off the coast of an adversary country, an adversary city, lie in wait there, and if ordered, launch potentially a nuclear attack. So this is a fearsome offensive weapon. The U.S. was watching these naval exercises just north of Russia in the Arctic Sea very closely to see if it's come along so far that they're able to give it a real-life test, in effect. There were clearly preparations for doing that. They had a submarine in these exercises designed to carry this very weapon. But in the end, those ships left the Arctic Sea last week without carrying out the test. And the U.S. believes it's possible they ran into technical difficulties doing so. Also, because of the nature of where that is in the world, it ices over this time of year, so the window was limited. But bigger picture as well, Kate, you and I have talked about this and others, the concern that Vladimir Putin wanted to make a threat to the world, in effect, to show the power of his weapons. And this was one of those potential tests, one of those potential demonstrations here. And that's why the U.S. is watching this so closely.
Yeah, as they should. Great reporting, Jim. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. I really appreciate it. So tonight, President Biden is departing for a big overseas trip, heading to Egypt for the United Nations Climate Conference. One thing on the agenda, the suspended climate talks between the U.S. and China. David McKenzie is live in Egypt for us. He joins us now. David, how important are these talks really to the overall global effort to try to make progress in tackling the climate crisis?
Okay, they're critical. Both the US and China, the world's two biggest emitters, they need to talk to provide leadership to other countries, like here at these climate meetings, to toe the line, to get to where we need to get to avoid the climate crisis. I also spoke to Secretary Kerry, the climate envoy of President Biden. I asked him about this new initiative by the U.S. to use carbon credits to offset the companies around the world. He says, despite the criticism, it's important to have the funding out there. Take a listen.
Once the rules get fully worked out and everybody's in a comfort place, hopefully this will be implemented because we desperately need the money. There is not enough money in any country in the world to actually solve this problem. It takes trillions, and no government that I know of is ready to put trillions into this on an annual basis. That's what the scientists and the UN finance reports say we must do. 2.5 to 4.5 trillion every year for the next 30 years.
There's still no formal talks between China and the U.S., but I expect that will stay that way, Kate, until perhaps next week when Biden is due to meet Xi Jinping at the G20 meetings. Kate?
Yeah, the first face-to-face encounter in person since President Biden took office. It's good to see you, David. Thank you very much. So this just into CNN. Federal authorities have arrested an 18-year-old in New Jersey for allegedly threatening to attack a synagogue. You remember, this comes just days ago, was that the FBI made a very big and bold alert to the public about a broad threat to synagogues throughout the state. Jessica Schneider is live in Washington with more detail on this. Jessica, what are you picking up?
Well, Kate, the U.S. attorney in New Jersey just announcing that they have in fact arrested an 18-year-old New Jersey man. He's now charged for making threats against Jewish people and threatening to attack a synagogue. And as you mentioned, really this all materialized last week when the FBI really sent out an alarming tweet. They said in that tweet that they had received credible information about a broad threat to synagogues in New Jersey. Our team at the time noted there was no specific target or timing mentioned, but that this tweet was prompted, in fact, by an online posting with anti-Semitic comments in a forum that was frequented by extremists. And at the time last week, authorities were especially alarmed because the posting was written as if the attack on a synagogue had already occurred, which it had not. But now there is one suspect under arrest for allegedly posting what authorities are now calling a manifesto video where he allegedly spewed hatred and he threatened to attack a synagogue. Now, this 18-year-old that was arrested, his name is Omar Al-Khatul. He was arrested and interviewed by authorities, and now we're told he's been voluntarily transferred to a hospital for examination. But Kate, at the hospital, the complaint actually says that he told an employee that he had been communicating with someone on social media he believed to be affiliated with Al-Qaeda, and he told them about these alleged plans to essentially blow up a synagogue. But this suspect now in custody and facing that one count of transmitting a threat. Kate?
Jessica, thank you for bringing the update. I appreciate it. So President Biden, he is suggesting that Elon Musk's relationship with other countries is, quote, worthy of being looked at after the billionaire's purchase of Twitter and maybe his activity on Twitter. Oliver Darcy joins me now with much more on this. Oliver, what are the concerns here? President Biden was asked about it at his press conference, and his answer is getting a lot of attention.
Yeah, a remarkable thing for the president to say, right, that the world's richest man, his relationships with other countries is worth looking into. But he's not the only one saying this, Kate. Right. Last month, Senator Chris Murphy, he actually wrote Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and he asked the same. He asked the Treasury Department to review Musk's relationships with other countries, particularly because of some investments from foreign governments into Twitter. So Chris Murphy, he said, given Twitter's critical role in public communication, I am concerned by the potential influence of the government of Saudi Arabia. As you know, the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States has the responsibility to review transactions that could result in American business being controlled by a foreign person. And then it goes on. Whether this amounts to anything, we're not really sure where it's going to go.
What is the next step? What are you looking for?
Yeah, well, the Treasury Department's not going to comment on this, and so we're not really sure where this is or whether it's going anywhere serious. But there are these calls for the U.S. government to examine these relationships Musk has with other countries, specifically because he now controls Twitter, which is a hugely important communications platform here in the United States.
Absolutely. It's good to see you. Thank you so much, Oliver.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Kate Baldwin. CNN Newsroom with Ana Cabrera is next.
Hello, thanks so much for joining us. I'm Ana Cabrera in New York. Your vote, your voice, and now your patience. 2 days after the midterm elections, we still don't know which party will control your government and its future priorities. In the Senate, 3 races are still too close to call, and Republicans need 2 of those seats to take the majority. And the nominees from both Arizona and Nevada are both election deniers. Now, in the House, Republicans are inching toward a slim majority. They have locked in 209 seats. You can see there they need 9 more to flip the House from the Democrats. CNN's Sarah Seidner is in Phoenix outside the Maricopa County Election Center, one of the biggest population centers where we're waiting on those vote totals to update. Sarah, Arizona has some of the most closely watched races on the state and national level. When will we have answers?
That is a very good question, Anna, and I wish I could give you an exact number, but I have someone here who can give you some great numbers and some updated numbers. We are here with the chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. Bill Gates is here with us, and we are actually inside looking at the tabulations happening right this minute. The counting continues, and I know that you guys will be counting until you are done. I mean, that's where we're at. Can you give me a sense of how many people came out to vote? Was this a huge turnout?
Yeah, so this was we've had a big turnout through the whole election, right? Because it's not just election day. We started early voting several weeks in advance of that. But with respect to election day itself, we had about 230,000 people come in person. But then also, so they voted in person, and then in addition to that, we had another 290,000 people who came with their early ballot, which under Arizona law, they can come and just drop it off. They don't want to wait in the line, just drop it off and head on their day. So when you combine both of that, it was a very busy day. And that 290,000 mail-in ballots that were dropped off on Election Day, it was a record and broke the previous record by 70%.
70%. Are you saying that's the number more people, 70% more people voted in this particular election?
No, what I'm saying is that 70% more voted by dropping off their early ballot. And why that's relevant is if you just vote on Election Day, you put it in the tabulator, it is counted that day or in the wee hours of the next day. If you drop off an early ballot, it means it has to come in on Wednesday and start the process of being signature verified. So we have experts here who go through, compare the signature on the outside of the ballot envelope with the signature that we have in our voter registration file. So that takes a while because we got to get that right. We want to make sure we want to follow the law. We want to make sure that every eligible vote is counted. And by the way, that's how it's been since the 1990s. We've had a significant amount of mail voting in this state since the 1990s. This isn't new to us. I was here in 2006 when I was a Republican lawyer who was here watching the situation, making sure that the laws were being followed. And I sat on the steps outside of this building for days in a close congressional race. People who are saying what's going on here, they haven't been paying attention the way that I have and a lot of my friends have. This is how we run elections in Arizona. If people don't like that, they can go to the legislature, have the legislature pass new laws. But in Maricopa County, we follow the laws that are passed by the state legislature.
And that has been your message to those that are questioning what is happening here. There have been a lot of allegations. I lastly just want to ask you if you can give me a couple of vote counts. How many votes from today do you still have to count? In other words, how many votes that were brought in on the day of the election in those envelopes do you still have to count?
We have to count all of those that were brought in from Election Day. None of those have been counted and reported, the 290,000.
So that is for sure, 290,000.
Makes up part of that 400,000, that's right.
So we're still at that number. Bill Gates, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for letting us in to see the process. And we are going to send it back to you. Still, we're about between 400,000 and 410,000 votes here in Maricopa County that still need to be counted. And that is a huge number because there's only about 560,000 votes across the state that still need to be counted. We'll give you an update as soon as we get one. Anna?
Sarah, real quick, can you ask Bill when he estimates those votes in Maricopa County will be counted?
Yes. Yes. You know we do this to you every day, and I'm just going to have to do it to you again. When do you anticipate the votes will be counted in total, those 400,000 plus votes?
Well, we will be going into next week. There's some onesie-twosies, again, pursuant to Arizona law, but I think that we'll see the lion's share here wrap up by early next week.
Okay. Early next week, can you give me a day? Are we talking Monday? Or we?
Maybe, as long as you won't hold me to it. But I think that's what we're looking at this point. Again, given the number of ballots here, the Arizona laws that we have to follow, and the fact that accuracy comes first.
There you go. Accuracy comes first. Bill just telling us, look, it's probably going to be early next week. We knew that, I think on Friday, you thought that maybe Friday 95 to 99%, but that has changed partly because there were so many people who came in and dropped those ballots, those early ballots off the day of the election. So that's where we are, and I promise you, we'll give you the information as soon as we get it. There will be another count that happens, I think, this evening and an announcement.
Correct.
Okay? Back to you, Arnold.
Okay, and of course, both the governor's race and the Senate race there in Arizona are key races everybody's watching. Thanks, Sarah Seidner and Bill Gates. Now let's go to Nevada. The Senate and governor races both too close to call there as well. CNN's Rosa Flores is in Las Vegas, outside the Clark County Election Department. Rosa, when do you expect the final votes counted there?
You know, Anna, we've been asking that same question, just like Bill Gates just told Sarah Seidner, and we're getting is very similar. In essence, they don't know, but here in Nevada, we know that by law, the unofficial results have to be presented by November 18th. So that's next Friday. And of course, everyone here watching these two races, both the U.S. Senate race and also the governor's race, the margins are razor thin. We are watching this. Now, overnight, the U.S. Senate race got even tighter. It's less than 3%. Right now, the individual who's in the lead is the Republican, Adam Laxalt. The incumbent Democrat, Catherine Cortez Masto,
is trailing by under 3%. But of the ballots that are coming in, the ballots that have come in overnight, they have been trending in her favor. Now, we are hearing from both campaigns taking to Twitter to say the following. The communications director from Catherine Cortez Masto's campaign saying, looking at the numbers that continue to come in, and we're on track to win. Adam Laxalt also taking to Twitter saying last night, when exactly as we anticipated, he says he added more in the rules. At the end there, he says no status change. And what he means by that, Anna, is that he could win as well. Both camps clinging onto every single vote. Tens of thousands, though, are still remaining to be counted. Anna?
And we know that those ballots had to be postmarked by Election Day and arrive by Saturday. So those ballots are still arriving and will be counted this weekend or beyond. Rosa Flores, thank you. Now, if Democrats lose either Nevada or Arizona Senate races, it would all come down to Georgia again. Deja vu. And it will be weeks before we have that winner. A runoff election is scheduled for December 6th. CNN's Nick Valencia is in Canton, Georgia, north of Atlanta. Nick, are we already seeing some national money funneling into this sprint to the finish?
Well, we are seeing the start of the cavalry of top Republicans coming to town, Anna, when later today Herschel Walker kicks off his runoff campaigning alongside Republican Senator Ted Cruz. So we're seeing this doubling down in the investment by the GOP in Walker's campaign. We should expect to see the same from Democrats when it comes to Raphael Warnock. And one of the biggest questions, though, after Tuesday's election is whether or not we're going to see the former president here, Donald Trump, or if Walker will begin to distance himself from his longtime ally, just like we've seen a lot of Republicans do so since the election. Just listen to Lieutenant Governor here in Georgia, Jeff Duncan, and what he said to our anchors on CNN this morning.
My advice, if anybody in the Herschel Walker team wanted to listen, would be to make 3 successful phone calls. One is to tell Donald Trump to stay out of Georgia for 4 weeks. He's toxic and he would do nothing to help the ticket. Secondly, I would pick up the phone and call Brian Kemp and ask him for his help and apologize for not endorsing him during the primary against David Perdue. And third, I'd call Ron DeSantis and ask him to come to Georgia as often as he possibly can the next 4 weeks.
You hear Duncan mention Brian Kemp. A big takeaway from Tuesday is just how much Walker underperformed Brian Kemp, about 163,000 votes. With Kemp not on this runoff, how is that going to impact Walker's attempt to get out the vote? Meanwhile, happening right now, Anna, Raphael Warnock is hosting his kickoff to his runoff campaigning just down the street from his old church, Ebenezer Baptist. This is the start of a very long 4 weeks for both candidates. Anna?
Nick Valencia, thank you very much. Let's step back now and really take in the bigger picture. CNN's John Berman is at our magic wall to walk us through the races still in play and the all-important balance of power. John, where do we stand in the House? Let's start there.
In the House of Representatives right now, in terms of the races that have been called, Republicans have 209 seats. Democrats have 192. There are 34, I'm going to write this down, 34 uncalled races. Republicans you need to get to 218 to control the House of Representatives. Simple math here. Republicans need 9 seats. Democrats would need 26. The reason I'm writing this here is to show you this. Of the uncalled races right now, Republicans lead in 13, Democrats lead in 21. So Republicans lead in 13, they only need 9. Democrats lead in 21, they need 26. So the question is, if you're a Democrat, can you get there? Can you get from 21 to 26? Let's take a look. It's hard, right? It's hard, but not impossible. They would need to flip 5 of these red seats right now. The most vote-rich environment for them, in theory, is on the West Coast, some of these districts out there. You have Oregon's 5th congressional district, only 79% reporting. The Democrat trails the Republican by 7,000. Not impossible. California, we have a lot of really close races with a lot left to count. In California's 3rd congressional district, you have a 9,000 vote margin, but you only have 44% reporting, so a lot of room to grow there. In the 13th congressional district, separated by just 203 votes, only 40% reporting. Down here, closer to San Diego, you have the 41st congressional district, separated by 453 votes, only 41% reporting. So you see in California, Democrats could pick up a number of seats there. And then the race that a lot of people have been watching which is way closer than anyone was anticipating. And this is in Colorado, Colorado's 3rd congressional district. It's the seat held by very conservative election denier Lauren Boebert. She'd actually been trailing by 64 votes until about an hour ago. There was some new counting reported. She's now ahead by 386 votes with 96% reporting. We don't know exactly how much vote is left and where it's from. We have been told in Pueblo County, which is a county that does skew towards the Democrats, there are a couple thousand at least ballots left to count. So not impossible. Not impossible this switches again. It could go back and forth for some time, Anna.
Thank you for ending on my home state of Colorado. That is a really interesting race there with Lauren Boebert and the competitor there, Frisch. Thank you so much, John Berman. And now looking ahead to the future of the country. Right now, even conservative media is turning on Donald Trump after years under his tight grip. But will the GOP move on from the former president? And a beachside home teetering on the edge of a sandy cliff as Tropical Storm Nicole unleashes on Florida. We're following the storm's path. Plus, are we finally near the peak? Americans feeling the pain of inflation? Getting some good news today. Control of the House and the Senate still hanging in the balance as votes are still being tallied. And Republican leader Kevin McCarthy faces the prospect of his party winning the slimmest of majorities in the House. And that means to become Speaker, he would need to win over some of the hardliners he's butted heads with in his party, like Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. CNN's Manu Raji is live for us on Capitol Hill. Manu, McCarthy may have to make concessions to the very wing of his party that's being blamed for the GOP's underperformance. So what kind of maneuvering are we seeing right now?
Yeah, it's really all about the margin for Kevin McCarthy right now. Of course, we have not yet called the House yet, but it appears they could be on track for a majority, potentially a narrow majority, far narrower than what Kevin McCarthy wanted. His team had hoped going into Election Day that they could get potentially 20 or more seats. That would give them some flexibility, some room to lose some votes, not just on legislating, but also getting the votes in the full House in order to become Speaker. Remember, next week is the beginning of the process. Republicans will go behind closed doors. They will nominate their choice to become Speaker. He only needs a majority of support within his conference to do that. The big vote comes in January. That's when 218 votes will be needed in the full House for him to get elected Speaker. And if there is a narrow Republican majority, say 220 seats, maybe 225 seats, he can only afford to lose a handful of defections. Otherwise, it gets very complicated, which is why behind the scenes, a number of these members of the Freedom Caucus are pushing for a number of different issues, including giving them more leverage over a potential speaker in the new Congress, as well as giving them more time to review legislation, also to get some commitments to at least consider moving forward in potential impeachment investigations. So the question is, what will McCarthy do? Because the demands are being made.
Okay, Manu Raju, thank you for that update. Trumpty Dumpty had a great fall. That is the front page of the usually Trump-friendly New York Post today. And it's not the only one that might have turned the page. Other conservative media outlets pointing the finger at the former president after Republicans appear to be underperforming in the midterms. You have this from the Wall Street Journal editorial board. Trump is the Republican Party's biggest loser. He has now flopped in 2018, 2020, 2021, and 2022. The Washington Examiner writes this: these midterm elections have made it crystal clear that voters want to move past the chaos and dishonor of Trump. And perhaps the most stinging of all, from a Fox News column that says Ron DeSantis is the new Republican Party leader. Let's bring in a pair of CNN political commentators, Republican strategist and former Trump campaign advisor David Urban, and Democratic strategist Maria Cardona. Guys, good to see you. I know you've been burning the candle at both ends, so thanks for making time to discuss with us. David, I'll start with you as we just showed those, headlines today. What message did voters send to the Republican Party and Trump in this election?
Yeah, listen, I think voters want to see perspective. They want to hear about the future, not about the past. They want to keep litigating 2020 and past elections. They would have a vision, a clear vision for how we become more prosperous. Kevin McCarthy did that with a commitment to America to a certain extent. But, there was a drag. I mean, unfortunately, the president backed a large group of Senate candidates who who have failed thus far, right, to win in all these elections. And listen, the Republican Party, just like the Democratic Party, wants to win. And so I think that you see these headlines in the Post and in the Wall Street Journal because Republicans want to win. There's so much stake for America. There's so much at stake for America. Republicans can do better, and I think they're going to look to do better in the future. So this little piece about DeSantis, I can't imagine there's going to be a Lincoln dinner, these fundraising dinners are held across different states and counties, that they're not going to want Ron DeSantis there to speak.
But I do think, as you said, they're looking to the future. The question is Trump part of that future of the Republican Party?
Well, listen, Donald Trump is always going to be a part of the Republican Party is not going to just quit Donald Trump because the Republican Party has a large group of folks who love Donald Trump. They're ride or die Trumpers, right? They're going to be there no matter what. And so this is what happened in the 2016 race, right, where there was a great big field and there's a good core of Trump supporters. They're always going to be remain there. The president's done a lot of great things when he was in power, when he was the president, and people don't forget that. But people want to hear about the future, not about 2020 anymore.
So Democrats, of course, beat expectations, but they still suffered losses, Maria, and this is how the president's responding to questions about the future and his plan moving forward.
Mm-hmm. What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently to change people's opinion of the direction of the country, particularly as you contemplate a run for president in 2024?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is. The problem is the major piece of legislation we passed, and some of it bipartisan, takes time to be recognized. I'm not going to change anything in any fundamental way.
Here's the thing, Maria. President Biden's approval is still in the mid-40s, and 2/3 of voters in the exit polling said they don't want him to run for re-election, and yet he'll change nothing?
Well, I think the question was not about re-election. It was about the agenda moving forward. And there's no question on it.
But that, what we heard from voters, should send a message to him that they aren't happy with the status quo.
Well, I think the message that was sent was that they certainly did not accept the extremism that many of the Republican candidates were offering. And if you actually look at President Biden's agenda items, they pull off the charts individually. So what he said was actually right. The American people are just now understanding what it is that they're going to get, for example, out of the Inflation Reduction Act. The way that prescription drug, all the prescription drugs are going to go down in cost, the insulin, right? All of that, the energy costs, all of that is starting to be registered right now. But I do think moving forward, what this president and Democrats are certainly going to do, and he talked about this last night as well, is he is better than anyone focused on trying to make sure to do something in a bipartisan way. There are absolutely things that we should do for the American people working with Republicans. For example, I hope that we're able to come up with some kind, maybe not a grand bargain, but something where we can do something on immigration, for example. The Dreamers are now in trouble. The Supreme Court completely took away the protections that they have for DACA kids. That could be something where we could come up with something when the majority of the American people, including majorities of Republicans, accept that this is an important thing to move forward. So there are certainly going to be things, and we need to do things, because I think one of the biggest messages that the American people gave to both parties is that they want us to work together for the future of the country.
Yeah, they want the government to work, right? People at home, they want their government to work.
That's exactly right.
They want their government to work. They're tired of hearing, bickering back and forth. Listen, Maria's point, we could do something on opioids, right? Fentanyl coming across the border, flooding across the border, killing so many Americans. We need to do something to stem that tide, right? We got to do something better to help Americans.
I like the messaging we're hearing from you both about working together. It's one of those, we'll see what actually becomes reality. Let's talk real quickly about the runoff in Georgia, now just about a month away. And let's talk strategy on the Republican side, David, if you will, because a lot of people, I think, blame Trump for the losses last time around when Democrats picked up those 2 Senate seats in Georgia, giving them the majority. And yet Herschel Walker was handpicked by Trump to run for Republicans for this seat. And it is so close. So would they benefit? Would your Republican Party benefit by having Trump, get more involved in this race?
So look, it's a mixed bag, right? Because the former president does motivate the base, going to get a lot of folks out. But at the same time, the gentleman at the top of the ticket in Georgia, Governor Kemp, He garnered, 54% of the vote in Georgia. And so if I were Herschel Walker's campaigning team, I would go to the Kemp folks and say, hey, join us, lock arms with us, knock doors with us, help us get out there and get elected. Because there were a lot of Kemp voters, right? There were a lot of people that voted for Kemp that didn't vote for Herschel for some reason. Maybe they voted for Warnock, maybe they didn't vote. But I think Brian Kemp is
or
the
the
best,
third party, right?
Or the third party, who got about 2% of the vote, right? And so they're going to need to figure out how to reach that third party candidate's electors. And listen, Brian Kemp is a great messenger, conservative messenger, and he's obviously done very well in Georgia. And I think it would behoove the Walker campaign to emulate what he did.
Real quickly, Maria, because Walker, of course, has been hit with allegations of domestic violence. Paying for abortions.
Right.
And yet, look how close this is. Look how close this race is. So I wonder, does the Warnock camp need to shift its strategy in order to get him across the finish line?
Well, I think what the Warnock campaign needs to do is to continue to communicate with all of the voters, and I do think this is going to be a big challenge for both parties. And I actually think that the third party candidate probably took votes from Warnock, and so if they do a...
Why do you think that?
Because he's a libertarian, and a lot of the policies that he supported were moderate, were not extreme the way that, a lot of the Republicans were attracted to. And so I think he has a chance to really reach out to those third-party voters, independent voters, to talk to them about the agenda, what he has done for Georgia, and yes, to point out the extreme nature, the lack of morality, the hypocrisy that surrounds Herschel Walker. And I think one of the important things to look at Georgia is Herschel Walker, I think, is so close because the Republican Party surrounded him with support. My question for the future of the party is the only way that they're going to be able to get rid of Trump, if they really want to turn the page, is for all of the leaders that in Georgia supported Walker would now stand up and say, you know what, Mr. Trump, this is our party. You need to go away. If they don't do that, there is no way that the Republican Party is going to be able to turn the page on Trump, especially if next week the expectation is for him to jump into the presidential race.
I see what you did. You didn't make it about Democrats in your interview. You suddenly made it about Republicans. So let me give you just 10 seconds to respond really quick.
The party's not going to get rid of Donald Trump anytime soon. I think he's going to be an asset at certain places in Georgia. I think the key is going to be turnout, right? You're going to have to operationalize all this stuff. People don't want to hear about Herschel's past. They're not going to hear this is about knocking doors and dragging people to the polls. That's what's going to be done December 6th.
Thank you both.
Good time.
So much, Maria and
Thanks.
David.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you guys. Okay, today some new hope that inflation may be peaking, and Wall Street is celebrating. You see there, the Dow up almost 900 points right now. Plus, we're covering what's happening in Florida. State still reeling from Hurricane Ian, and some areas getting hit yet again. How Nicole is impacting the state next. A major economic report out, and the good news is inflation is easing. The bad, prices are still sky high, up 7.7% year to year. Right now, though, Wall Street's loving the good news part of this equation, up over 800 points for the Dow. But how should the rest of us read this? Are we nearing the peak? Matt Egan's here to break it down for us. Take it away.
Well, Anna, we finally have some good inflation news. Now, it's kind of crazy. You wouldn't normally say that about 7.7% year over year for inflation, because if you look back over 40 years, that's still one of the highest readings we've seen. But everything is relative, and this is a big improvement from the 9+% inflation that we saw in June. This is actually the coolest reading in 9 months.
Oh, wow.
And if you look under the hood, there's some positive developments. We saw that core inflation, which strips out food and energy, unexpectedly slowed sharply month over month. And some items are actually going down in price. We saw price declines month over month for apparel, for airfare, used cars, fresh fruit. Moody's economist Mark Zandi, he told me that today's report, while it shows that inflation is still painfully high, he said inflation is, quote, definitively moderating. And he thinks that unless oil prices go crazy or something happens in China with COVID lockdowns, then he thinks that inflation will be, quote, much lower a year from now, which obviously would be good news. And that's sitting well with investors on Wall Street.
Okay, fingers crossed. That does sound like really good news. Unfortunately, however, we're also starting to see big companies enact big layoffs, right?
We are. I mean, when CEOs are worried about a potential recession, they cut costs. And one of the fastest ways to do that in a big way, unfortunately, is to lay off workers. And so we have seen that, especially in the tech sector. Lyft laying off a lot of workers. We've seen Twitter, of course, cut half of its staff, Meta, Chime. And then some companies are not cutting jobs, but they're also just not adding them anymore. Amazon, a corporate freeze on hiring, Apple hiring freeze as well. And, you know, this is actually what the Federal Reserve wants to do. They want to cool off this jobs market because it's been too hot. It's been so hot that it's been pushing up inflation. So even though that doesn't sit well for people who are unfortunately losing their jobs, this is what the Fed was hoping for. This is not playing out, though, in the broader economy. Jobless claims, they're still historically low. So we need to keep an eye on that and to see whether or not that continues.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt
Thanks, Anna.
Egan. I want to get to Florida now, and unfortunately, so sad here, 2 people are dead because of Tropical Storm Nicole. We have video of bridges closed, curfews now in place, and the governor extending a state of emergency to include all 67 counties. Nicole damaging areas that haven't even recovered from Hurricane Ian back in September. In Central Florida, several beachfront homes collapsed into the Atlantic Ocean. Farther south, crashing waves took out a section of this fishing pier. This is in Lauderdale by the Sea. And check out this restaurant in Stuart, Florida. It was completely flooded when the high surf breached the seawall there. CNN meteorologist Tom Sater is joining us now. Okay, what's next? Where's this storm headed?
Right up the entire East Coast. And this is going to spread a lot of flooding rainfall. I mean, remember, the leaves are down and the entire East Coast. Get to the north, the winds are going to blow more down. If you live near a drain, a storm drain, please clean it out. Listen, this is very rare. We've only had 3 hurricanes to ever make landfall in the month of November before this one. This is the very first hurricane during the month of November to hit the East Coast of Florida since 1935. We always say on it, every tropical system has its own characteristics. People are going to be shocked when they see more of the damage. We've got tractor trailers blown over on the roads in Jacksonville, water rescues, submerged cars, homes, businesses, down toward Orlando, flooding, St. Johns River already flooding, Tampa, Skyway Bridge shut down over into St. Pete, down power lines, down traffic signals, the fatalities as you mentioned. Tornado watch extended to the north until 7 p.m. I expect that to go even further into North Carolina. Here's our damage area with the possibility of tornadoes. That's going to be a big deal. These storms are moving at 60, 65 miles an hour. The storm surge area is critical. Like you mentioned, from the 6-foot surge we had at Port Canaveral, 3 to 5 in many other areas. Dozens and dozens of homes and businesses are condemned because the waves have been moving in and eroding the structural base. Wind advisories continue all the way up to the north. Here is Ian's track, 43 days apart. We didn't have enough time to fix the beaches. Sometimes it takes months, even a year. So it's vulnerable. And of course, this path right through the same area is really creating the problems. Flood watches, it's the St. John River just getting below flood stage from Ian, now back above. Can you think of the people who live there? Here's the track as it moves north. This is a big deal here because we've got a cold front that's approaching, and when the cold front moves in from the west, it's going to enhance the rainfall, squeeze out a lot more. Look for massive flooding in the mountains of the Appalachians, North Carolina, into Virginia, and back behind it, snowfall. We've got blizzard warnings into the Dakotas. How many times do you got a blizzard warning, ice storm warnings, at the same time you have hurricane warnings? Now, those have been allowed to expire, but this is not over with. There will be more power outages, already over 300,000 currently. A surprise, surprise. November.
Yeah, crucial information you're delivering there. Thank you very much, Tom Sater. We knew the economy would drive voters to the polls. What we didn't know, how big the abortion issue would play in this election. Our polling guru, Harry Enton, joins us to break down what the polls got right and didn't. More now on the all-important midterm elections and the battle to control Congress. That crushing red wave that really both parties expected didn't happen. Republicans will likely win a majority in the House, a modest one. It's not there yet, though. And the Senate is still too close to call. 3 races still undecided. Let's break down the numbers with CNN senior data reporter Harry Enton. Okay, so how odd is it that Democrats did relatively well, considering how unpopular or the low approval rating of the president?
This is bizarre, frankly. I mean, if you look right now, you looked at our exit poll, Joe Biden's approval rating was 44%. You look at the last 3 times you had a president whose approval rating was in that general area, you're talking about seat losses, 40, 63, 54. This is going to be well less than that. They may keep it to a net loss of, let's say, 10 seats or less. It's unbelievable. And I think there is some clue in the exit poll as to somewhat why that occurred. Take a look at those who said that they somewhat disapproved of Joe Biden's job performance, and then say, okay, who did they choose in their vote for Congress? This is 11% of the electorate. It's sort of small, but it's a very important slice. They actually voted for Democrats by 4 points. So there's this portion of the electorate that didn't like what Biden was doing, but didn't hate it, and they decided to go with Democrats.
Why?
Why did they decide to go with Democrats? Because this turned into a choice election. If you look at our exit poll and you say, okay, do you have a favorable view of the Democratic Party, Republican Party, neither or both? And essentially what you see is the favorable views of both the Democratic and Republican Party were basically equal. They were basically equal. And so what occurred here was that voters were basically said, we're going to have a choice here, and we're going to actually kind of split our decision here. Normally it's all about the party in power, but this election, for any number of reasons, did not turn into that. Instead of being a referendum, as we're so used to in past midterm elections, it turned into a choice.
And the other issue that we kept talking about leading in was the economy being the top of mind for voters, and even the exit polls really confirming that. And yet it doesn't seem like it was so cut and dry that that would translate into pickups or, you know, big support for Republicans, since they are the party out of power currently.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the exit poll, I think the thing that was so surprising to me, or one of the many things, to be honest, that was so surprising, is that, yes, inflation was the #1 issue. There was all this talk, you know, okay, will abortion be up there? And in most polls, inflation was well above abortion. But in our exit poll, it was basically equal. It was basically equal, so that although voters who chose inflation as their top issue overwhelmingly went for Republicans, they were basically canceled out by the overwhelming number of voters who said abortion was their #1 issue, and they went overwhelmingly for Democrats. And this was especially true among women voters, because if you look at our exit poll, among women voters, what was the #1 issue? It was abortion. It was abortion. And I think that this is something that kind of got lost on all of us, right? There were all those special elections after Roe v. Wade was overturned, in which Democrats were not only doing as well as Joe Biden did in these districts, they did better, and it turned out that translated on Election Day.
Harry Enten, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I don't know how you're still standing.
I
You've
have
been
no
working
idea,
all
to be
around the
honest.
clock to be able to talk
No
that
clue.
fast. Yeah, and so clearly. Thank you. All
I
right.
hope
Elon Musk vowed to clean up Twitter and purge bots and bogus accounts. So why are fake accounts thriving and making this platform even messier? That's next. What do former President Trump and basketball star LeBron James have in common? Well, just hours after Twitter launched its new paid verification system, fake accounts using their names and likeness popped up. And we just learned the company's cybersecurity chief called it quits. Let's get to CNN's Donny O'Sullivan now. So, Donny, that didn't take long. How easy is it to create a fake Twitter account and make it look real under this new system?
Yeah, things are getting really messy and really confusing on Twitter right now, Anna. In the past 24 hours or so, we have seen so many fake accounts pop up pretending to be people, pretending to be very famous people, and getting that blue verified check mark. For years, that mark has meant that is the real person. We know this person says who they say they are. So what's been going on? I want to show you a few of the fake accounts that have popped up. A fake account for Nintendo, the video game company, showed Mario there, their iconic figure, giving the finger. We have we have blurred it because it's offensive, I guess. Also, we saw somebody set up a fake Donald Trump account. This person, Brian Whelan, saying he was able to verify a fake Donald Trump account in less than 2 beers, but really just getting at the point there that he was able to do this quite quickly. And finally, just over the past day or so, Twitter has given a blue check verified mark to Jesus Christ with the handle there @Jesus. So, as you can see, things are getting a bit confusing at Twitter under Elon Musk, Anna.
Yeah, we're kind of joking about this, but there could be serious consequences to these fake accounts.
Well, absolutely. So you think about, see how easy it was to make those accounts. Think about, in terms of emergencies and natural disasters, even politics, calling elections. We rely so much on Twitter accounts, whether it's in disasters, to get information from emergency services, or on election night, or even during an election campaign. I mean, think how easy it is going to be for somebody to spin up an account to make it look like it's belonging to a campaign or something official or is affiliated. We even saw with that Trump account. So look, there's serious consequences could come of all of this. We have seen pretty much everything Musk has brought in at the company. They've talked about changing again, so this might all change by the end of the day, by the end of the week. But it is kind of causing a bit of unnecessary chaos on the platform. Anna?
And it just makes you wonder, how does this platform survive all this? Donnie O'Sullivan, thanks for being on top of it for us. And that does it for us today. Thanks so much for joining us. Stay with CNN for all the developments on the midterm elections. Our special coverage continues right after this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bianna Goladrigo. Welcome to CNN Newsroom.
And I'm Boris Sanchez. We're grateful to share an afternoon with you. And Bianna, I've been a huge fan of your work for a long time. This is actually the first time we're getting to anchor together, so this is a treat.
It's a whole new world. Excited to have these 2 hours with you, Boris.
Same. So we are tracking the very latest results in the midterm elections, and we're still closely watching the vote count in a handful of states this hour, with control of the Senate and the House still hanging in the balance some 40-plus hours after polls closed in many states. The three remaining races will determine the fate of the Senate. In Arizona, Trump-backed Blake Masters is trailing incumbent Mark Kelly, but a quarter of all votes have yet to be reported there.
And in Nevada, incumbent Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto trails slightly behind Republican Adam Laxalt. And in Georgia, that contentious Senate race between incumbent Raphael Warnock and Trump-backed former football star Herschel Walker heads to a runoff on December 6th. Let's start it all with the outstanding votes still coming in. CNN's John Berman is at the magic wall with that. So, John, let's begin in Nevada. Where do things stand now, and what votes are currently outstanding?
First of all, I thought you guys were going to sing like an Aladdin duet with the whole new world thing. I'm a little disappointed it didn't get to that.
But we'll talk for next hour.
We'll talk about Nevada in the meantime, and hopefully this satisfies people. Look, you can see Adam Laxalt with a very narrow lead over Catherine Cortez Masto, a lead of about almost 16,000 votes. In Nevada, the rules are if ballots are postmarked by Election Day, they can actually arrive until Saturday, and they will be counted. So we estimate, and we don't know for sure because more votes could still arrive, we estimate there could be anywhere from 110 to 135,000 votes still to count, and that includes in a couple of the very large counties, including Clark County here, which is 75% of the state. You can see Catherine Cortez Masto actually with a lead. She's the incumbent, by the way, over Adam Laxalt here. There's about maybe 80,000 mail votes and drop box votes still to be counted there. And in Washoe County, which is kind of a swing county, we think there are maybe 20,000 mail votes to be counted, but there could be more, and more still could come in. And we're starting to see reports of some of the more rural, very red counties' mail votes also. It's key to find out what this vote looks like. We'll learn more over the next several hours. We'll get a report tonight. They'll keep on counting these. We'll get a report tonight when those come in, what the breakdown of the votes are there. Last night, there were some counts from Clark and Washoe County, and those skewed heavily Democratic, and Catherine Cortez Masto was able to close the margin from about a 23,000 vote lead down to 15,000 guys.
And John, let's focus on Arizona because they're waiting on a big batch of votes to be counted and reported. What's the status of that Senate race?
Well, when you say big, I'm going to write this number because they have 560,000 votes still to be counted. That's a big number right there, even in multicolor as you go across. In Arizona, ballots need to arrive by Election Day, or they can be dropped off by Election Day. It's mostly a mail voting state, and these counties have just a lot of votes to process. They have a long time to do it. They have several weeks to do this now, and that's just the way they get it done in this state. There's some 400,000 votes still to count in Maricopa County, the largest county in the state. You can see Mark Kelly, the incumbent Democrat, with a lead of about 8 points there. We know from 2 years ago, and I should note overall, he's got a 95,000 vote lead there. We know from 2 years ago, Joe Biden won Arizona, but was by like 10, 11,000 votes. Donald Trump, the margin between the two candidates kept on closing as they counted more votes there. Typically, in most states, mail seems to favor Democrats. In Arizona, the late arriving mail ballots, the last election, skewed more toward the Republicans. So we just don't know who it will favor. It could be enough to give Blake Masters the runway to overtake Mark Kelly. We'll have to wait and see. It's sort of the polar opposite as in Nevada, where there could be the runway for Catherine Cortez Masto to overtake Adam Laxalt. We're going to have to wait and see, guys.
The one commonality is the wait and see. I hear what you're doing there, John. So let's turn to the House and to a small number, perhaps the closest race in the country. Hardline Trump Republican Lauren Boebert has just pulled ahead of her Democratic challenger, Adam Frisch. What is going on there in Colorado?
All right, let's take a look at that. That's the Colorado 3rd Congressional District. Lauren Boebert now with a lead of 433 votes. 433. That is very close there. I just pulled up the counties. I want to give you a sense maybe where there's still ballots left to be counted. Up until about an hour and a half ago, Adam Frisch, the challenger, was ahead by, I think it was literally 64 votes. Yeah. But now Lauren Boebert's ahead by 433. We think in Pueblo County, which skews slightly Democratic and is one of the larger counties, there are still a few thousand votes left to count. So it's possible with the margins so small, this could flip again, although she grew her lead in the last hour from the mid-300s to 433. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but these numbers have been very narrow.
Yeah, she grew that, as you said. Yeah, it was just recently. It was in the 60s. John Berman, you have been busy for us. Thank you, my friend. We will see you, hopefully, if you're standing in the next hour. Thank you.
Whole new world, guys. Whole new world.
We'll send a magic carpet your way. John Berman at the Magic Wall. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
We do have reporters on the ground in key locations spread across the country. CNN's Josh Campbell is in Arizona. He's at the Maricopa County Election Center right now. And Josh, the Board of Supervisors said there were some 400,000 votes that still have to be counted where you are. What's the latest on that?
That's right, Boris. Numerous votes still yet to be counted here. We're talking about 400,000, and that includes 290,000 ballots that were dropped off. They were in envelopes, but dropped off on Election Day itself. For whatever reason, someone had their ballot but decided that they wanted to actually go to a polling location or a drop box and actually submit that, and that still has to be counted. We're told that those 290,000 haven't begun to be counted yet. That's next in the queue. Now, that's Maricopa County we're talking about, the most populated county here in the state of Arizona. But if you go south to Pima County, we're talking about Tucson, still 160,000 votes yet to be counted there. We're told that those results might come sometime next week. So a lot of patience, as our colleague John King likes to say. Pack your patience. These votes are being counted, and we'll just have to wait and see what those results are. Where I'm here now in the processing center, this was fully staffed with a lot of people, a lot of volunteers, a lot of election workers. One thing I want to point out that we've been seeing all day is what's called this adjudication process, and that is if there's a ballot that is submitted that has some type of issue that requires greater scrutiny, by state law, it actually is reviewed by a bipartisan team, a Republican, a Democrat, that goes to and tries to determine what is the issue here and how is that rectified. The head of elections here in Maricopa County spoke to CNN this morning, talk more about that process. Take a listen.
Let's say maybe on one of those races, the voter marked both candidates, let's say in the Senate race, and maybe they circled one of them and said, no, I mean this. That goes into adjudication, and we have boards of one Republican, one Democrat. They look at those to try to determine what the voter's intent was.
Now, voter intent, that is key here. Again, these Republicans and Democrats looking at the ballots, trying to determine what did the person mean to do. And this is so important to point out because we've heard so many of these conspiracy theories that perhaps the longer it takes to vote, that there might be some kind of mischief at play. It's actually quite the opposite, and talk to officials. This is election integrity at work, election security, this methodical process that's underway. One official actually described it and said, it's much like if you go to the airport, right? Imagine if there wasn't TSA screening. You would get to the gate a lot faster, but how much confidence would you have in the security of that process? That's what they're doing here, going through methodically, trying to ensure that every vote that's submitted is legitimate and every legitimate vote is counted. Guys.
Such an important point, Josh, especially because there are candidates out there, specifically in Arizona, that might weaponize that process to their advantage. Josh Campbell from Maricopa County, thanks so much.
Well, the CNN Decision Desk estimates that there are about 135,000 votes that remain to be counted in Nevada, plus any mail-in ballots that have until Saturday to arrive. CNN's Gary Tuchman is live outside of the Clark County Election Center in Las Vegas. Gary, when could we have some answers?
Well, Bianna and Boris, John Berman just gave some excellent analysis about Nevada, and now let me add to it here on the ground. We're not going to get final answers today, but today could be a very pivotal day. That's because inside the Clark County Election Department here, in the most populous county in Nevada, more than 75% of the population, they will be counting tens of thousands of mail-in votes. We were told yesterday at a news conference they will be counting 12,700 mail-in votes that arrived in the mail yesterday. They also told us they would be counting votes that were dropped in election boxes on Tuesday, on Election Day, more than 300 boxes throughout the county. We did not know that number yesterday when they told us they were going to do that. We found that out last night, and it's a huge number, about 57,000 ballots. So you're talking about very small margins, as John Berman just mentioned, 15,812 in the Senate race, 34,000 in the gubernatorial race. And this county, as I said, heavily populated, 3/4 of Nevadans, is heavily Democratic, the most Democratic county in the state of Nevada. There are also mail-in ballots being counted in Washoe County, which is the second largest county, where Reno's located, and in other small counties. But this is the big enchilada. This could make the difference in the race. What's really important to point out, and I think this is crucial, there are a lot of people who are saying, why is this taking so long? It's close, it's taking long, it sounds suspicious. This is exactly what would have happened if it wasn't a close race. Because in Nevada, there are 1.8 million registered active voters in Nevada. Every one of them got a mail-in ballot. It is the #1 way to vote here in this county, mail-in ballot. And you have until Saturday. It has to be postmarked by yesterday, but as long as it arrives by Saturday, it will be counted, and it would have taken that long anyway. Bianna, Boris, back to you.
The counting is methodical. There is no room for error, and we're just reminding viewers and everyone in the country watching this that patience is a virtue, especially when it comes to our elections. Gary Tuchman, thank you. Well, money is pouring into Georgia as the state Senate race heads to a runoff. Today, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee announced a $7 million investment to boost incumbent Raphael Warnock.
And it's not just money pouring in, it's some familiar faces as well. We want to take you to the Peach State now, and CNN's Nick Valencia, who's live for us in Canton. Nick, Republican challenger Herschel Walker is going to be joined by Senator Ted Cruz at a rally tonight. Both parties pulling out all the stops less than a month before voters go right back to the polls.
And we're seeing this doubling down in investment from both parties in these respective campaigns as they begin this, this next long 4 weeks of campaigning in this runoff. And it was earlier today that incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock kicked off things just about a block or so away from his church, Ebenezer Baptist. And he has painted this previously, this choice between Herschel Walker and himself, as not so much a choice between a Republican and a Democrat, as much as it is a moral choice between right and wrong. And it was earlier today, standing in front of a mural of famed civil rights icon John Lewis, that he appeared to make a plea to those voters who may not have voted for him in the midterms.
I'm going to need you to stick with me for 4 more weeks. Can we do that? They are going to throw every dollar at us that they can, every lie, every attack. But I think we have something better. We have the truth, and we have hope for the future.
And later this evening at 6:30, we will begin to see the start of that Republican leadership cavalry coming to town to stump for Herschel Walker when he's joined by Senator Ted Cruz when he kicks off things for his runoff campaigning. One of the big questions, though, after Tuesday is whether or not we will see Walker begin to distance himself from former President Donald Trump. Will Donald Trump show up here in Georgia in the next 4 weeks, or will we see Walker begin to distance himself as we've seen other Republicans start to do since Tuesday? Boris, Bianna?
That is a fascinating point. Nick Valencia, live from Canton. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Well, some good economic news. Inflation cooled much more than expected last month. Wall Street sure is loving the news, but what does it mean for you? We'll tell you up next.
And some in conservative media are pulling no punches on former President Donald Trump. They are touting Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis as the Republican Party's future. We'll discuss next.
The Dow is surging today after a new report showed that inflation is showing signs of cooling. Prices jumped, but not as much as economists were expecting.
Yeah, let's bring in CNN's Matt Egan right now. Matt, what was your biggest takeaway from the Consumer Price Index?
Well, Boris, to be honest, it does look like inflation is finally chilling out. Month over month, prices were supposed to heat up. They didn't. That was encouraging. Year over year, 7.7% gain for consumer prices. Normally, that is alarmingly high, but we're obviously not in normal times. This is actually a 9-month low for annual inflation, and it is a big improvement from the 9% inflation we saw over the summer. Now, of course, this doesn't mean inflation is gone. People are still feeling the sticker shock at the gas station, the grocery store, but we have seen some prices start to drop. We saw month-over-month price declines for apparel, airfare, used cars. That was a big one, and one of the big reasons why inflation was cooler than expected. Moody's economist Mark Zandi, he told me that he thinks that today's inflation report does suggest that inflation is, quote, definitively moderating, and he thinks that inflation will be significantly lower a year from now as long as oil prices don't go crazy and as long as China's COVID lockdown policies don't ramp up. This report, of course, set off an earthquake on Wall Street. We see the Dow up by more than 1,000 points, over 3%. We're actually seeing bigger gains for the S&P 500. The NASDAQ is up 6%. I mean, that would make a great month. And we're seeing that all in one day. All three are on track for their best day since 2020. Investors are obviously hoping this means the Fed will be able to stop slamming the brakes on the economy soon enough. Some, though, they think the market could be overreacting just a bit. Former New York Fed President Bill Dudley, he told me that this is just one report, and he stressed that the jobs market has not cooled off quite enough.
One does not make a pattern, but this is definitely encouraging and welcome news. We also saw mortgage rates, though, are up again. Credit card rates have hit a record high. What more do we know on that front?
Well, the Fed's war on inflation is making it more expensive for all of us to borrow. That is a feature, not a bug of this Fed policy. They're trying to cool things off by making it more expensive to borrow. So we've seen credit card rates hit record highs. I mean, there's never a good time to carry a credit card balance, but this is arguably the worst time. Experts are saying now is a good time to, if you have a credit card balance, to consider transferring that to a zero-interest credit card or to take out a low-interest personal loan to try to pay some of that debt off. Mortgage rates, we know, continue to go up sharply, above 7% for the first time in 20 years. This has just been a dramatic move, and this means that you can afford less home. Let me show you what I mean. If you looked at a $500,000 house a year ago, at sub 3% mortgage rates, you are now paying $1,000 more per month than you would have a year ago, all because mortgage rates have gone up. And remember, this is not going to get you an extra bedroom or an extra, I don't know, a man cave or anything like that. This is all money that's going to the bank, and it is making it that much harder to afford homes right now.
Man cave or woman cave, anybody is still struggling to get an affordable loan out there. It's amazing to see how quickly those rates have gone up. Matt Egan, thank you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Everybody loves a good cave, whether man, woman, or anything else. So perhaps in the least surprising news of the morning, President Biden has taken credit for today's strong economic data, pointing to his economic plan, even though yesterday he acknowledged the struggles that a lot of Americans are facing, though he argued the nation is on the right track. Listen to this.
The voters were also clear that they are still frustrated. I get it. I understand it's been a really tough few years in this country for so many people, and it's hard to see the results from actions that we took while we have to implement what we've done. But I believe we took the right steps for the country and for the American people.
Joining us now is CNN political commentator and Republican strategist Alice Stewart, along with Xochitl Hinojosa. She is a CNN political commentator and former DNC communications director. Xochitl, let me begin with you. As we just heard there from Matt, a better than expected inflation report. President Biden came into the midterms with very low approval ratings, came out of it with the best midterms of any sitting president in 20 years. Given all the headwinds that the party and the administration were facing, what do you make and how do you explain their better than expected outcome here?
Yeah, well, it's pretty incredible, especially where President Biden was even about a year ago. I will say that President Biden should be taking a big victory lap right now. While the economy is strong, there were struggles with inflation and gas prices. One thing that President Biden did, though, is he talked about the economy. There was a lot of criticism of the Democratic Party leading up to the midterm elections. They weren't focused on the economy enough, but they passed the Inflation Reduction Act to lower costs. You had about 19 speeches and events from the president since October 1st until the election day talking about the economy. He understands that people are struggling, and he is trying to address it as much as possible. The other thing that I think that has been helpful is that days leading up to the election, you saw President Obama on the campaign trail really making that case for Democrats about who do you trust with the economy, who do you trust on issues of crime. These are experienced candidates, and he made that clear contrast compared to Republicans who had a very terrible field because they lacked that recruitment in the final year ahead of the midterms.
And Alice, to you, it seems that momentum is swinging a bit toward the Democrats here, given that the anticipated red wave was more of a trickle, and if this economic news holds into the coming months and inflation continues to go down, how do you think that might influence a potentially Republican-controlled House, even Senate?
Well, look, only in America can party celebrate the fact they're potentially going to lose the House and maybe even the Senate, but I appreciate the Democrats' optimism. And look, coming out of these elections, our CNN exit poll shows that 3 in 4 Americans are dissatisfied with the economy and say that the status of our economy is poor. And moving forward, if there's divided government and if Republicans do end up taking control of the House and the Senate, they're going to have to work across the aisle. And I appreciate the President Biden's words yesterday saying that he plans to bring Republicans and Democrats to the White House and have conversations about how both sides can move forward with their agendas. But it's going to be an uphill struggle when we have Republicans that are really committed to tackling inflation, reducing government spending, and implementing policies that will help secure the border and also fight crime in comparison.
Alice, doesn't it say more about a weakness within the Republican Party and perhaps division within the party that with all this economic headwind, with all the anticipation that Republicans were going to dominate on Tuesday, it didn't happen? I mean, that is reason for Democrats to celebrate.
That's absolutely a concern, Boris, and we attribute a lot of that to candidate quality. We've been talking about that for quite some time. Former President Trump picking certain candidates to run, and unfortunately, a lot of their focus was on election denying and conspiracy theories, and that hurt us. And I think moving forward, and we're hearing more and more that the Republican Party really needs to take a lesson from this election and look at who they want moving forward to be the face of the party. And I'm old enough to remember when former President Trump said Republicans are going to get tired of winning. Quite frankly, we're tired of losing, and the party needs to decide if they're going to be a party of winning elections or worshiping Donald Trump. And we're seeing more and more Republicans are looking to put him in the rearview mirror and find a new face to the party. Absolutely.
So, Sochi, clearly a mandate from voters here to get things done, and you can just see an example of the expectations being so low that this and the resulting so far that we're seeing would be somewhat of a victory for Democrats, given that we are very likely to see change in power in the House at least. What should the president focus on in the lame duck in these last few months, anticipating that we may see a change in Republicans come into power? In Congress, we had Senator Klobuchar on this morning talking about continued funding for Ukraine being on the agenda, passing the Electoral College Act, and obviously the debt limit and raising the debt ceiling is going to be a factor. What should the president be prioritizing in the weeks ahead?
Well, those are absolutely the issues that I think that Congress will focus on. I think that the president is, as he said yesterday, he's looking for bipartisanship. He understands that he is likely working with a divided Congress, and he is a master of the Senate. He understands the way that Congress works. And so I think that you will see President Biden a bit more hands-on, trying to figure out how to negotiate deals. But then you also have the Democratic base who is going to come out, and various constituencies are going to come out and say, Democrats, you owe us. We delivered on Latino voters. We delivered on black voters. Where is the DREAM Act? Where is the Voting Rights Act? Where are all of these issues that you promised us in the last presidential election? And heading into 2024, you still need to deliver on. So I think it's a very tough position for the White House, but I do think that you will see a president try to find common ground with Republicans on issues, you know, like that you mentioned before, because he understands the importance of bipartisanship.
There are some questions about how well Democrats did deliver with Latino voters, but we got to leave the conversation there. Xochitl Hinojosa and Alice Stewart, thank you both so much for the time.
Thank you. Well, hundreds of thousands without power as Tropical Storm Nicole hammers Florida with dangerous storm surge and heavy rain. We are live on the ground up next.
And Russian Navy vessels seen preparing for a possible test of a nuclear-powered torpedo. We have some exclusive reporting to CNN next. We have some news just in to CNN. Moments ago, a Connecticut judge ordered Alex Jones to pay an additional $473 million in punitive damages to the families of the Sandy Hook shooting victims. Those damages include fines for Jones' violations of the state's Unfair Trade Practices Act, and to cover the plaintiff's attorney fees and costs. That, of course, comes on top of the $1 billion of compensatory damages that a jury awarded the families last month. How much of that money those families are actually going to see remains an open question.
Turning to Florida now, where Tropical Storm Nicole made landfall early this morning along the state's east coast. Ocean surge and high winds partially collapsed this fishing pier.
Yeah, a lot of coastal homes were also impacted, and officials say that at one point the storm surge measured nearly 6 feet. And you should keep in mind, as we're watching some of this dramatic footage, some of the areas had already been impacted by coastal erosion that was left behind by Hurricane Ian, making matters even worse. We want to take you to South Daytona now, because that's where CNN's Leila Santiago has been reporting. Leila, what are you seeing there?
Well, I think you make a good point, not just the storm surge, but also the high tide earlier. That really was an issue when you talk to emergency management officials. So I'm on Daytona Beach right now, and I want to show you down the road what you're seeing across the area, which is roads filled with water. You know, cars flooded out. I spoke to one business owner who said he left this morning, came back to 2 feet of water inside the building. And then I want to swing the camera around and bring you over here, because you see that down there is the International Speedway Bridge. Takes you to the other side where you have that barrier island that is really seeing a lot of what you're talking about, Boris, that coastal erosion. In particular, one community down there, Wilbur by the Sea, has had partial collapse in terms of the homes. They've deemed dozens of homes down there unsafe, correlating that to coastal erosion. And again, note that timing you mentioned off the top. 6 weeks ago, Hurricane Ian left that area very, very vulnerable. So much of what we're seeing right now is what was expected. The rain, the wind, the flooding, and the coastal erosion that is going to be a problem here for quite some time.
Yeah, what wasn't expected was the timing of this storm. Unusual to be so late in the year. Leila Santiago, thank you.
The storm is tracking a colossal path, not only across Florida's peninsula, but it's forecasted to hit other parts of the country as well.
CNN meteorologist Tom Sater joins us now for more. So, Tom, where is the storm headed next?
It's going to head right up through Georgia and then go up the entire East Coast. And this is not over with, and we are going to see some disastrous flooding because all the leaves are down. When you get up to the north, the winds are going to blow down more. Storm drains are going to get clogged in many communities. Just 43 days ago, we had, of course, Ian move in, Category 4. At 3 in the morning at Vero Beach, we had, of course, Nicole. But last night, the wind field from Nicole was over 500 miles out from the center. Ian's was only 320. So the stage was set for just terrible situation with dozens and dozens of condominiums, of course, condoned. You can't live in them anymore. Evacuations. We've had 2 fatalities, mainly due, of course, to electrocution on the down power lines. Tornado watch until 7. That'll be extended northward through the Carolinas. Some of these storms are moving at 60, 65 miles an hour. So here's the severe weather threat. But the winds are wide, and the damage from the surf, incredible. We've got tractor trailers blown over in Jacksonville. Water rescues there. Tampa, we've got major bridges closed down. We've got down traffic lights. The winds are doable right now, but as they lift northward, the winds, of course, in the advisories will down more power lines, 300 without power. Here's Ian's path, which did the damage on the coastline. But again, St. Johns River, one of the slowest receding rivers in North America, is now back above flood stage. That's terrible. But as this moves northward, we're going to get a lot of rainfall with this. And of course, back behind it, there's a foot of snow in Bismarck right now. How many times do you have a blizzard warning and a hurricane warning in one 24-hour period? It's not over with. It's going to be bad for the next couple of days.
Oh.
And we know you're going to be tracking both of those for us. Tom Sater from the CNN Weather Center, thanks so much.
Sure.
President Biden will soon have his first face-to-face meeting with China's leader Xi Jinping as tensions rise between the two nations. We'll tell you what's at stake up ahead. We turn now to a CNN exclusive. The U.S. observed Russian naval vessels preparing for a possible test of a new nuclear-powered torpedo. A senior official tells CNN the underwater vessel, known as a Poseidon torpedo, is capable of carrying both conventional and nuclear munitions and has virtually limitless range.
Let's bring in CNN's Natasha Bertrand, who joins us now live. Natasha, this is really concerning given the reporting indicating what Vladimir Putin might do given the recent losses in Ukraine for Russia.
Exactly right. The U.S. is watching this extremely closely, and my colleague Jim Sciutto now is reporting that the U.S. in recent weeks did observe these Russian naval vessels, including a cruise missile submarine, in the Arctic Sea preparing for a possible test of a new nuclear-powered torpedo. Now, importantly, this torpedo, called the Poseidon, is capable of carrying both conventional and nuclear munitions, and the U.S. does not believe that any test would have actually involved detonating a nuclear device. Instead, any potential danger from this would likely have come from a malfunction of the nuclear propulsion system, which could pose risks from radioactivity. But still, the U.S. has been monitoring any potential test of the Poseidon closely. According to the Congressional Research Service, the torpedo is intended primarily as a retaliatory weapon designed to hit back at an enemy after a nuclear strike on Russia. And its nuclear propulsion system does give it a virtually limitless range. So that has caused some concern among the U.S. officials that we speak to. But the Russians, they also do not appear to actually have carried out the test because of what the believes were technical difficulties. This is a key point, with one Western diplomat telling us that the failure to successfully conduct this test was indicative of how Western sanctions on high-tech goods inside Russia are having a real impact on Russia's military industry. But the bigger picture here is that any test carried out by the Russians at this point would likely have inflamed tensions with the U.S. even further at a time when they have been carefully monitoring for any signs they might be preparing to use nuclear weapons.
Yeah, the timing of this reporting is fascinating, given that Russia just concluded its annual nuclear exercises as well. Natasha Bertrand, thank you.
So President Biden is soon headed overseas, and he's going to have an important meeting on the docket. He's sitting face-to-face with China's leader, Xi Jinping, for the first time since he took office on Monday. The meeting is going to be held on the sidelines of the G20 summit.
CNN's Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. So, Jeremy, what is the White House hoping to accomplish with this meeting?
Well, listen, Bianna, President Biden and President Xi have spoken on the phone or via video conference 5 times since President Biden came into office, but this will be their first face-to-face meeting, something that U.S. officials say is key to developing this relationship between these two leaders. And there are some major issues for these two men to discuss. Taiwan is perhaps at the top of the list of discussions here, as we've seen China increasingly ramp up its military activity in the Taiwan Strait. They're also set to discuss Russia's invasion of Ukraine. China has been a major economic haven for Russia amid U.S. and other sanctions. There's also, of course, discussion expected about the U.S.-China trade relationship, and also North Korea, where we've seen North Korea ramp up its missile tests. And, of course, China has significant leverage and influence over North Korea. But officials are lowering expectations for any kind of concrete results to come from this meeting. The National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, just told us that he's not expecting any deliverables, but rather some tasking to officials on both sides to continue to engage on discussions. But what Jake Sullivan did say is that President Biden is really hoping to get a feel for Xi Jinping in this current moment, as he has just reached a historic third term as China's party leader, perhaps the strongest leader in China's history at this point. And President Biden wants to get a sense of where this relationship is headed, and to also establish a baseline between the two sides to try and avoid misunderstandings and miscommunication going going forward. So it'll be interesting to see whether or not they're able to at least get to that level of understanding between the two sides as a result of this first meeting coming up next week.
All right. Jeremy Diamond, thank you as always.
Still ahead, 2 Kansas City police officers are being hailed as heroes, springing into action to save a baby girl who stopped breathing. We're going to hear directly from those officers after a quick break. Now, this is really, really special. A 1-month-old baby girl who's fighting RSV is lucky to be alive thanks to the quick thinking of 2 Kansas City police officers.
Yeah, body cam video that you see right here shows officers Richard Duchesne and Charles Owen responding to the newborn's home and rushing inside before EMS arrived. They found baby Camilla in her father's arms, not breathing. One officer put her in the palm of his hands and then began compressions.
Hold her up. Let's see. If I could. She's breathing now. She is breathing. Hold her over and let's see if there's an obstruction in her mouth. Come on. Hey, let me see. Come on. Open that mouth. Come on. Come on. Turn her over to her side a little bit. Come on. There you go. There we go. There you go.
Nothing short of heroic. Those officers, Charles Owen and Richard Duchesne, are with us now. Officers, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for everything that you did to save baby Camilla. Officer Duchesne, if I can just begin with you, take us back to that moment when you walked into the house and saw this 1-month-old lifeless at that point.
So once we initially got the call, we responded in a matter of about 30 seconds. Once we arrived on scene, I immediately took the baby from the father. Once I put her on the palm of my hand, I didn't feel a heartbeat. At that point in time, I just reverted back to my training and instincts as receiving from the department. I started infant chest compressions. I did that for about 10 to 15 seconds. And then my partner started talking me through it. Let's do some back thrusts. So that's when I flipped her over on her back. We started doing repeated back thrusts. Then I did it a little bit harder. And shortly after a few harder back thrusts, we started to see life bring back to her. And after about one last good back thrust, we finally got her on her side. And that's when she started coming back to life and we could started seeing breathing again.
Wow.
Officer Owen, we just heard Officer Duchesne talk about reverting to training and being focused in a moment of extreme tension. Just watching that video gives me anxiety. I'm wondering what's going through your mind when you walk into that home and these parents are obviously, understandably, panicking. What are you saying to them? How are you processing that?
Yeah, we knew that they were going to be pretty scared and worried. So we made sure that we took our car with lights and sirens up to pretty much the front of the house. So they heard us coming in. When we got there, you know, we had to show confidence, let the parents know that we were in charge and we were going to do our best for that child.
Officer
And
Duchesne,
it paid off.
It sure did pay off. We're looking at a picture right now of Officer Duchesne in the hospital with baby Camilla, and I was just telling our producers how tiny this baby was. It really just looked like a doll. And for perspective, you can even see her in Officer Owen's hand there. How worried were you at the time that she may not make it?
Well, we're always fearful. We're always worried that if what we're doing is enough. Obviously, once she started breathing, it was a huge sigh of relief. After being able to talk to the family, we actually found out she was a preemie. At the time, she was only about a month and 6 days old, and she only weighed about 4 pounds. So, and being in those, I parent myself. I also had a preemie child, so I was able to be in their shoes essentially, and knowing that fear of what could happen. But the biggest thing is just being able to reassure them that everything's gonna be okay. She's breathing, and that's the biggest thing.
And Officer Owen, we heard from the baby's mom calling both of you heroes and saying that they would do anything for you. How rewarding is that for you, given the challenges that you faced confronting situations like this all the time?
It's extremely rewarding. I mean, it's definitely the highlight of our careers. So. Very rewarding.
You are
heroes. As police officers, we don't get to see the end result because we go with so many calls and we don't necessarily get to see that end result. And being able to go check on the baby, and finding out that she's going to be okay is the biggest rewarding part for us. Yeah.
This family will never forget you. And Camilla sure won't either. What a resilient baby, too, as a preemie. Thank you both so much for everything you do every day, and especially for saving this 1-month-old baby's life. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, officers.
Thank you.
Well, we are awaiting more vote counts in several states, including Nevada. State election officials there are giving an update right now, and we'll take you there live up next.
Buenas tardes. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Boris Sanchez. You're live in the CNN newsroom.
Should I do it in Russian now, Boris?
Do it.
I'm Bianca Koladriga. Good to see everyone. We are continuing to watch the vote count in a handful of states this hour for you. Which parties will control the Senate and the House is still undecided, and there are 3 remaining races that will determine the fate of the Senate. In Nevada, incumbent Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto trails slightly behind Republican Adam Laxalt. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's a big race in Arizona. Trump-backed Blake Masters is trailing the incumbent Democrat there, Mark Kelly. A quarter of all votes there have yet to be reported, though. Meantime, in Georgia, the Senate race between the incumbent there, Raphael Warnock, and the Trump-backed former football star Herschel Walker, it's heading to a runoff on December 6th. We do want to get back to those outstanding votes that are still coming in with John Berman at the Magic Wall. John, let's start with Nevada. We'll hold off on the whole new world solo that you're going to give us, and we'll start with Arizona. What's going on there?
Okay, first of all, I'm glad, I can barely speak English. Here you guys are talking Spanish and Russian here. All right, we did get some votes counted just seconds ago. You can see the total lead for Mark Kelly is now reduced a smidge. It had been 95,000 some, and now it's in the 94s. Why? Because we just got new votes reported from Yavapai County. Let me see if I can do this. I haven't had a chance to do this trick yet. All right, this is the blackboard here. This is percentage. I'm not going to do percentage. I'm going to do raw votes. There were 1,195 new votes reported for Kelly, 1,743 reported for Blake Masters there. So you can see closing that margin, about a 550, 650 vote difference there. So Blake Masters closing the gap ever so slightly, guys. So you can see this is how it's going to go in these states for some time, back and forth one way or the other. We're going to get these new batches of votes reporting, and it's going to change this margin one direction or the next here. This was Yavapai County, which is a county actually that leans for the Republicans by about 30%. So the margin there for Blake Masters you might expect. So that's the thing that we're watching in Arizona. As you can see now, Mark Kelly still with a lead, the Democratic incumbent still with a lead of nearly 95,000, but a little bit less than it was about 10 minutes ago, guys.
And let's turn to the House now, John. Republicans need to win 9 seats to gain control. Where are those outstanding races?
All right, the House of Representatives here. These are the races, by the way, that are called. 209 for the Republicans, 192 for the Democrats, which means that the Republicans need 9 seats to take control. The Democrats would need 26 seats. This is where the uncalled races are. Anywhere that's colored in here, the uncalled races. You can see the Democrats would need to change 5 of these red districts here right now where Republicans lead into Democratic leads to have a hope of taking back the House. That's a steep climb. They have a steep climb. They need to win 26 of these overall to do it. I can show you where some of them are. In New York, for instance, there is one uncalled race. It's New York's 22nd district, which includes Syracuse, 94% reporting. The difference there is some 4,000 votes. We'll see if that changes over the next several hours or maybe days as some more of the votes are counted there. In California is interesting. They lean on mail-in vote there. There are some districts here that really don't have all that much in yet. California's 3rd congressional district, you can see the Republican Ken Kiley is ahead by 9,000 votes, but only 44% reporting. Just 44% reporting, so a lot of room left there. In this race, California's 13th district, there's only a 203 vote difference between the two candidates and only 40% reporting. So anything could happen there. And then a race that I know a lot of people have been watching, which is in Colorado, Colorado's 3rd congressional district here. This is Lauren Boebert, the very conservative election denier. She now leads by 433 votes. This flipped. Adam Frisch was up by 64 votes a little bit earlier today, so she has now taken the lead, and we do expect to hear more votes reported from there over the next several hours, guys.
Yeah, significant gain for Boebert, given that we were just talking about a margin of some 60 votes just a couple of hours ago. John Berman will go down the Disney Vault another time. Thank you so much. Well, President Biden is set to take a victory lap just moments from now in Washington. And while there are still several key races still undecided, he's calling out the lack of this so-called expected red wave.
While we don't know all the results yet, at least I don't know them all yet, here's what we do know. While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen.
Let's go to CNN's Arlette Saenz. She joins us now live. Arlette, do we know exactly what the president is expected to hit on today at this DNC event?
Well, Boris and Bianna, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris will be speaking here in just a short while to thank those Democratic staffers and volunteers who helped fend off that so-called red wave. The president and his advisors have really been triumphant in their tone over the course of the past 24 hours, as the Democratic Party did not sustain those historical losses that the president in power typically does in other midterm elections. But even as the president is taking this so-called this victory laps of sorts, he is also staring down the possibility of having to work with a divided government. Yesterday, President Biden said that he is prepared to work with Republicans and that he expects Republicans to do the same with him. And that is why he held that call yesterday with GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, who very well could be House Speaker if Republicans take control of the House in the coming weeks as those races are coming in. But the president also drew some very clear lines of some non-negotiables for him, and that includes GOP proposals that would cut Social Security and Medicare or implement a nationwide ban on abortion. The president saying that those are the types of items that he would veto. So there certainly is a lot of challenging work ahead for the president. His team is closely watching how each of these races is going to play out. And this event could also be a sort of rallying of the troops as they are still facing that Senate runoff down in the state of Georgia. And depending on how the Senate races in Nevada and Arizona turn out, that race could very well determine control of the Senate. Now, the White House has said that the president is willing to help in any way that he can down there, whether it's through appearances or through fundraising. But it remains unclear if the president actually would be going down to Georgia, as that is the state that he did not visit in the lead up to these midterms. But we already heard from the DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, today, telling these people behind me to be ready to work in that Georgia Senate runoff.
Man, the music is bumping in that room. Arlette Saenz, please stand by. We'll come back to you as we monitor the president's remarks. Thanks so much. With control of the House of Representatives appearing likely to go to Republicans, the current House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, is making moves to be the next Speaker.
CNN Chief Congressional Correspondent Manu Raju joins us live from Capitol Hill. So, Manu, this won't necessarily be a slam dunk for McCarthy, but are there any other names being floated other than his?
Not at the moment, but that's what the hard right faction known as the House Freedom Caucus is threatening to do, put up a challenger against him, even if it is a long shot challenger who ultimately probably will not get enough votes to get elected Speaker, enough to force McCarthy to the bargaining table, cut deals, make concessions in order to give them their votes for his bid to become House Speaker. There are several demands that they are making that are on the table right now, one of which is to give them actually more power to oust a sitting Speaker, try to force a vote on the House floor to oust a sitting speaker. That is something that is a no-go for Kevin McCarthy. He would make him weaker as speaker. That's something that he certainly does not want to do. They also want to have more time to review legislation, have better committee assignments. And one of the things that some of them are pushing for is for McCarthy to keep on the table the option of moving forward on impeachment proceedings, something that he has not yet embraced, but some on the right have been pushing for either President Biden or some cabinet secretaries. Now, the reason why they have influence at this moment is because of the margins. Kevin McCarthy had hoped that they would have a 20-seat pickup. That appears unlikely to happen here. Potentially, they could have a very narrow majority, maybe 220 seats, perhaps 225 seats. That means he can afford very few defections on the House floor, because the first process is next week. There will be a leadership election internally. That's where they will nominate their choice for Speaker of the House. McCarthy only needs to get half of the Republican conference to vote for that. But on January, the first day of the new Congress in January, the full House will vote to name the House Speaker. That will require 218 votes. And if there are only 220 seats or 225 Republican seats, for example, then McCarthy can only afford to lose a handful of defections. Anything under 218 will complicate his bid for the speakership, which is why this group is using its power right now to try to force McCarthy to cut a deal. Behind the scenes, though, McCarthy is confident he will get there, but it may take some time to get the votes he needs. Guys.
All right, Manu Raju, very complicated indeed. Thank you.
Let's dig deeper now on this conversation with CNN political commentators Charlie Dent and Bakari Sellers. And Charlie, I want to start with you. As a former congressman, you're familiar with some of these intra-party battles for leadership. What do you make of the situation that McCarthy's in as he aspires to be Speaker, something he's been planning for years?
Well, these take-no-prisoners tactics that the Freedom Caucus deploys are very real threats. And, we saw what happened in 2015 when Kevin McCarthy tried to ascend. Many of these same members blocked him. They would not support him. So these guys are making demands and expecting concessions from Kevin. If the House is, say there are 222 Republicans, that means Kevin can only lose 4 votes, not 5. 4. And some of these guys might not vote for him because they can. They're not, I don't think they're very strategic in many cases. So I think this is a real threat. He should get the number, but some of those demands they're making about vacating the chair to remove the speaker, he could never agree to that. Or an impeachment probe without evidence. I mean, it would be terrible. But he's going to have to deal with this. Should he become speaker, he's going to face these kinds of bare-knuckle threats and demands almost every day. We watch this. I live this. I mean, and this is such a small margin for error for Kevin that I don't envy him at all. I mean, this is going to be a miserable experience.
Who else doesn't envy him is John Boehner. Perhaps he can give him a tip or two through all of this. Bakari, let me turn to you, because clearly a better night than anticipated for Democrats. President Biden had the best midterms for the last 20 years of any president. That having been said, it was kind of a mixed bag. I mean, a wonderful night, historic night in Michigan, not so great in New York State. Miami-Dade is now ruby red. What are some of the takeaway lessons that Democrats can learn coming out of these midterms?
Well, I think most Democrats would push back a little bit on the mixed bag, because I think by comparison to what this election was supposed to be, not just the prognosticators, but also the history going into midterms, I think by all means, it was, in all metrics, it was a success. I think what Democrats realize is that President Biden actually got a couple of things right. The first thing he got right was people were chastising him literally for his closing message on the fact democracy was on the ballot. And we saw that 2 of the larger issues on people's mind was 1, abortion, and 2, democracy. And I think the second thing that we see is that the future is really bright. And I think Joe Biden recognized that as well with some of the legislation that he signed and some of the executive orders he put forth, that young people came out in extraordinary numbers for the Democratic Party. That's the future of where this country is going. Generation Z, I mean, if you look at the numbers, particularly look at the University of Michigan, where you saw Gretchen Whitmer just completely obliterate Tudor Dixon at the polls. You saw this on college campuses, and for a long period of time, we ignored Generation Z. We knew they would vote for Democrats, but they weren't coming out in numbers like that. That changed Tuesday night. And so President Biden also was able to tap into that. And we have superstars in the party, contrary to what people believe, from Wes Moore to Gretchen Whitmer. I mean, we have legitimate superstars in this party. And I think that all in all, regardless of the success of Ron DeSantis, which has a lot to do with a lot of other things, it was a very good night for Democrats all across the country.
Yeah, CNN exit polls showed big numbers for first-time midterm voters, which you alluded to there, Bakari. I want to stick with you because you said something on CNN earlier today that piqued my interest. You were talking about the possibility of Joe Biden getting primaried in a potential re-election race in 2024. I'm wondering how you would feel about a potential Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer challenge to Biden in the primaries.
Well, I don't think those would be the individuals that did it because I think they have a lot more common sense than that. And I don't know why people are, I don't know why people are surprised by the fact that I actually told the truth. The fact is, this is not the same party that we had when Barack Obama was president of the United States or Bill Clinton was president of the United States. We have a very vocal and active left wing. We have a very vocal and active progressive wing of the party. And although this president has moved on things like marijuana, has moved on things like student debt relief, I think that we would be remiss if we weren't talking about what this presidential cycle would look like. And I would not be surprised at all if he got a challenge from the left. Do I want that? No. Is it an indictment on his success and how good of a president he is? No. But that's just a realization of where we are as a party. I, like many others, would support him, but he will have to go through each and every one of those steps as he evaluates whether or not at 80 years old he wants to run for president of the United States again.
No, he does have some tailwind off of the past couple of days and what we've seen in at least his own desire, as he expressed yesterday, to run again in 2024. Charlie, let me turn to you because somebody who did not have a good night was the former President Trump. We are expected to hear an announcement of some sorts for him next week. Do these numbers, do these figures, does the momentum and the trend that we're seeing in the Republican Party change what we may or may not hear from him on Tuesday?
Well, first, I think it would be crazy for him to announce next week that he's running for president, particularly if they go to a Georgia runoff. That would be the worst thing in the world for Herschel Walker.
But that would be him putting the party ahead of himself.
That's correct. It would be a terrible mistake. But look, a lot of people right now are blaming Donald Trump for this fiasco. I know in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, for example, Donald Trump endorsed Doug Mastriano, a horrible candidate that everybody knew was going to be terrible. And he's the reason why probably Oz lost, because Mastriano was just so weak that he dragged Fetterman across the finish line, who was also a flawed candidate. So I'm just stunned. The state house may be gone. They didn't pick up anything. But this happened all over the country. What part of losing are people comfortable with here? You can't nominate candidates. These ultra MAGA folks, did very poorly in the election. Many of them lost or they're struggling. More normal mainstream candidates like Tom Kean Jr. in New Jersey, they did just fine. They won. Those are the ones who won. But if you nominate candidates who offend the sensibilities of a lot of voters, you can't expect them to win. And so when Republican elected leaders get tired of losing, that's when they turn on Trump.
Well, I don't know. Are they tired? I mean, this is not the first election or midterm that he's lost.
I've said this for some time because I came from a purple district, a marginal district, and I used to worry about this. I said, guys, look what's happening in these communities. We can't win here with Donald Trump. If more of them notice, they'll speak up. Maybe they want to be in the minority for a long time. They want to be in the minority for a long time. Get used to it. It is no fun, but most of them want to win, and that's what's going to force them to turn.
All right. Charlie Dent, Bakari Sellers, thank you. Well, election officials in Nevada just gave an update on where their vote total stands.
Yeah, this unfolding in just the last few minutes. So we want to take you outside the Clark County Election Center in Las Vegas, where CNN's Gary Tuckman is reporting live. Gary, what's the update?
Boris and Bianna, it's good talking to you. Good afternoon to you. Here's the latest information that we have gotten from this county. The registrar just talked to us. He tells us there are now about 50,000 more votes still to count that have arrived in this building. Those 50,000 votes came in via the mail and via about 300 election boxes that were put in various voting centers on Election Day. Now, that's an important number because we have a deficit in the Senate race of less than 16,000 votes. Not a deficit, but a difference between the two candidates, the Republican leading, and a difference of 34,000 votes in the gubernatorial race, the Republican leading. So 50,000 more votes to count at this point. Something that will not register as a surprise to any of you, I suspect. The former President of the United States, Donald Trump, on his app has stated that Clark County has a corrupt voting system. This is the largest county in Nevada, and he says it's corrupt. I will tell you that the people here, the registrar who runs the elections, took it very personally at this news conference.
Obviously, he's misinformed 2 years later about the law and our election processes, which ensure the integrity of elections in Clark County and the state. We couldn't go any faster now, even if we wanted to.
626 more ballots arrived in the mail today. That's part of the 50,000. Ballots can arrive tomorrow and can also arrive on Saturday. Bianna Boris, back to you.
A lot of counting still to be done. Gary Tuchman from Las Vegas. Thank you so much.
A dramatic setback for Vladimir Putin as Russian troops retreat from Kherson, the only regional capital that the Kremlin has managed to capture since invading Ukraine. We'll hear exclusively from President Zelensky about his new strategy on the battlefield. That's next.
Plus, Twitter's top cybersecurity officer quitting. Details on turmoil that's plaguing Elon Musk's new company ahead.
Russia's war in Ukraine is taking a significant toll on soldiers on both sides of the conflict. America's top general says at least 100,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded in the war, and those numbers are likely similar for Ukraine.
Meantime, in the southern Kherson region, Ukraine says its forces have reclaimed several towns. This comes after Moscow ordered its forces to withdraw from the key city and other cities west of the Dnipro River.
Ukraine's President Zelensky and First Lady sat down with our Christiane Amanpour yesterday to discuss these latest developments. I know it was a wide-ranging interview and discussion. Christiane, what stood out to you from what you heard?
Well, a lot. I mean, they talked about Kherson. The president would not give me any sort of details about the much anticipated Ukrainian counteroffensive to try to win back that city, which, as you know, was the first and only major city that the Russians have been able to actually seize and occupy until maybe now. We do know from somebody who we profiled earlier this week that one of those villages has been liberated, and this person who we talked to earlier this week, she said her own aunt there in that village has now witnessed the Ukrainian flag being hoisted over the main building. So that's in one of the villages near Kherson. But I asked both the president and the first lady, and it was a first of its kind in terms of a joint network interview, how they were doing 9 months into this war that, of course, neither of them ever expected.
You asked whether I thought this war would last so long. No, because I didn't start this war. And I'm sure there isn't a single Ukrainian who knew what this will be and what tragedy this would bring to every home in our country. Because, I'll repeat, we did not start this war, but Ukrainian society united and showed that it was ready for what unfortunately was such a tragedy, showed that it was ready for these challenges. I was really impressed by the power of one nation and was impressed by the swiftness of the response of Europe, the whole world, and the whole international community that rallied around Ukraine for this challenge.
First Lady, what motivates you to get up in the morning? How do you feel that you've endured this war?
Well, thank you. It's a big question. It covers many spheres of my life. And what helps me get up in the morning, surely, as you said, it's my husband's example. I know that if he endures, then I have to endure.
I just wanted to say, Bianna and Boris, that actually the body language between this first couple was really quite important to witness. There was a humanity, there was a humor, there was a love, but there was a solidarity together for the people of Ukraine. And it was quite amazing to see. Now, on a much more, political and military level, the President Zelensky said that he was really grateful for American support. He really hoped and expected to be able to continue having that support after the midterms. And as he said in my interview, they really need more weaponry and especially air defenses. And to that end, the U.S. has actually announced today that they will send a new security package here, including air defense systems, more of them. Bianna and Boris?
Yeah, Christiane, I'm glad you noted the body language, because I picked up on that as well, especially for the First Lady. She did not come across as a politician or a politician's wife. She came across as someone representing a country that's facing unexpected war, right? And in these terrible and tragic headlines every single day. Fascinating interview. Thank you so much. Well, we are expecting President Biden to speak at any moment at the DNC event in Washington, D.C. There you see Vice President Harris speaking now, a victory lap of sorts, after avoiding a red wave that many had expected, Boris.
Yeah, and President Biden has been pressed on Elon Musk's potential threat to national security, why Biden is suggesting that it's worth looking into the billionaire's ties with foreign countries when we come back. We want to take you straight to a DNC event in Washington, D.C., where President Biden is speaking. Let's listen in.
We mean it. This is not a political piece. This is to say thank you, thank you, thank you. Most of all, thank you for believing in your country. Thank you. No, I really mean it. Thank you for fighting like the devil to make sure that we had a free and a fair election. And all those election deniers, so far, best of my knowledge, none of them has not said when they lost, they said we lost. That's a big deal. No, I really mean it. Tuesday was a good day for America, a good day for democracy, and it was a strong night for Democrats. For months and months, all of you heard from the press and the pundits was that Democrats are facing a disaster. Remember that? And all those polls, God love them. Historic losses were on the way, a giant red wave. Folks, that didn't happen. We were talking backstage here before we came out. Each of us crisscrossing the country, all four of us. And we're saying we'd come back and say, I don't know what they're talking about. No, I'm serious. The overwhelming response we were getting. And the fact that even those folks who may not like me or may not like somebody, but they agree with our agenda. They thought what we were doing. By the way, all the Democrats ran on the same agenda without being told, look, while votes are being counted, we don't know the outcome of all the races. Here's what we do know. We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first elected midterm, at least 40 years. We had the best midterms for governors since 1986. And experts said we couldn't beat the odds, but we did beat the odds. And we did it for one reason. This is not hyperbole, because of you and all of you up on the balcony. It's hard to see up on the balcony, but God love you. I really mean it. Because of you. You believed in the system. You believed in the institutions. You fought like hell for it. And that's the most important thing that happened, in my view, in this election. It was the first national election since January 6th, and there were a lot of concerns about whether democracy would meet the test. It did. It did. It did. And I want to compliment all those mainstream Republicans. I mean, they get in, they fought like we usually fight, and we got a result, and we accepted it. Everybody accepted it. So for many of you, you organized. You got the vote out. You volunteered at the polls. Think of all we heard before this election about all the people being intimidated, all the people being threatened at the polls, all the people who worked the polls. Despite the threats and abuses, too many poll workers on election day, and election officials have experienced of late, you did your job. You fulfilled your duty. You showed up. You did what you're supposed to do. And so did the American people. Look, the American people overwhelmingly support our agenda. Lowering prescription drug costs, making health care more affordable, rebuilding America, revitalizing American manufacturing, taking on climate crisis, and finally making big corporations pay their fair share. Preserving democracy and protecting fundamental rights. This is the progress and the programs that we ran on. And this is the vote that showed just some real enthusiasm for what we're fighting for. And guess what? It matters. You know, when we came to office, we inherited a nation and a pandemic raging and an economy that was reeling. But we went to work, all of you. And by the way, I know a lot of you just didn't show up on Election Day. You've been working the last 20 or so months for us. But you went to work, building an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And so, you know, the MAGA Republican trickle-down economic policy we decided didn't work for Americans. Our economic policies created 10 million new jobs. Unemployment went from 6.4% down to 3.7%, one of the lowest in 50 years. American manufacturing is surging with 700 new manufacturing jobs created and many more to come. And look, as I said all during the campaign, where in the hell is it written that America can't lead the world in manufacturing? We are, and we will, and we're going to continue to. Folks, look, just today we learned inflation came down last month. And mainstream economists are saying this is a really positive sign of the resilience of the economic recovery. It's going to take time to get inflation back to normal levels. We could see setbacks along the way, I realize that. But we are laser focused on it. That's why it's so critical for us to pass important legislation this year to lower those costs for families. And I know it's going to take time to implement our entire economic agenda, which we already passed, and for folks to feel it in their day-to-day lives. But I think folks are going to see it in the next few months. That's what's going to, and I think that's what they voted for. Watch what happens when people see new roads, bridges being built in their towns. They start to see the investments being made in electric rail all across America, where it's going to take significant number of vehicles off the road, reducing pollution. Watch what happens when there's affordable high-speed internet in every home in America. Watch what happens when they realize we meant what we said and the lead pipes start being pulled out of schools, daycare centers, homes, all across America. Watch what happens in January when seniors with diabetes on Medicare only have to pay $35 a month instead of $400 a month for their insulin. Watch what happens when big corporations in America start to pay their fair share. And by the way, a 15% tax, isn't that terrible? You all pay more than that. Look, but in 2020, the 55 largest of the 55 of the largest corporations in America paid zero on $40 million in profits. Those days are over. And watch what happens when new factories are being built in communities with American workers making the most advanced computer chips in the world. And by the way, that's going to create thousands of good-paying jobs. And I mean jobs between $120,000 and $135,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree to do them. Look, y'all made this possible, and we're just getting started. We're just getting started. We saw extraordinary results in these midterms elections that no one thought possible. More independents voted for Democrats and Republicans in this election. Young people, you voted at historic numbers again, just as you did 2 years ago. Young people voted to continue addressing the climate crisis, gun violence, personal rights and freedoms, student debt relief, all those things which you stepped up to do. As I said, women in America made their voices heard, man. I said last year that one of the most extraordinary things about the Dobbs decision is what was about to challenge American women when the justice said, let's see, they have it in their power, basically saying, let's see what they're going to do. Well, guess what? Y'all showed up and beat the hell out of them. Look, I said it then. Those who support ripping away the rights to choose don't have a clue about the power of women in America, but now I think they do. And by the way, no one worked harder to get that message across America than this lady right here. Look, I also think the American people sent a message that they want us to work together. I've always done that. I know I got criticized for it. When I ran, I said I was running for 3 reasons. 1, to restore the soul of America. 2, to build this economy from the middle out and the bottom up. And thirdly, to unite the country. Regardless of what the final tally showed, I'm prepared to work with Republicans. But the American people have made it clear. They expect Republicans to work with me as well. And folks, I'll always be open to any good ideas, whether it's Democrat or Republican, to move the country forward. But I've also made it really clear that if Republicans try to repeal the power we just gave Medicare to reduce prescription drug costs, I will veto it and let it happen. If Republicans try to walk away from the historic commitment we just made to deal with the climate crisis, I will not let that happen. If Republicans try to cut Social Security and Medicare, I will not let that happen. And if they try to cut taxes for the super wealthy again, the biggest corporations like they did in the last administration, I will not let that happen either. Look, now as we look at tax cuts, we should be looking at tax cuts for working people and middle-class people. And I'm going to keep the commitment we both made that no one making less than $400,000 a year will ever see a penny in their taxes go up as long as we are in power. And folks, and I love the Republicans talking about big spending Democrats. We're going to keep working to keep the federal deficit low. We cut the deficit in 2 years by $1 trillion, $700 billion, more than ever in all of American history. Oh, I don't want to hear Republicans calling Democrats big spenders. We're the ones bringing down the deficit. They're the ones that blew it up over 4 years. And one more thing. If Republicans pass, and I don't think they can do it now, a national ban to ban abortion, I will veto it. It's simple. We need to codify Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. And look, let me close with this. You've all heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. I, honest to God, have never been more optimistic about America's future than today. And I'm optimistic for a number of reasons. We're better situated than any nation in the world, to lead the world. We're better positioned than any nation in the world in terms of our economic growth and possibilities. And I'm optimistic because of the young people of this nation. You've heard me say it time and again, and I meant it. Your generation represents the best educated, the most talented, the least prejudiced generation in the history of the United States of America. And by what, I wasn't trying to be nice. I was just stating the facts. Just stating the facts. In 2020, many of you voted for your first time, and you volunteered in the first election. Well, look at what you did. When you exercised your power to vote, you elected Kamala Harris, the first woman vice president in American history. And you helped me keep my commitment that I would appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court, Justice Jackson. And guess what? She's probably the smartest person on the Supreme Court. And because of your vote this year, we're going to keep building the foundation we laid in the first 2 years. You proved once again on Tuesday that our democracy, the power in the hands of the people. For real, we the people, it really is truly in our hands. We set the course for the nation's future. We just have to remember who in God's name we are. And I hope if nothing else happens, remember this. There's not a damn thing, I really mean it from the bottom of my heart, not a damn thing we can't do if we do it together. We are the United States of America, and you made it better. Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Go get them. We got a lot of work to do. Thank you, thank you.
We've just been listening to
Yeah, go ahead, Bianna.
What a difference a week makes. You know, Boris, it was about a week ago that the president was there really trying to rally those DNC staffers who were deflated and ahead of what they expected to be a red wave. President Biden taking a turn here and saying that he's celebrating voters and really knocking some of those polls because they defied expectations. And he's thanking voters, especially young voters, women, who came out calling Tuesday a good day for America, a good day for Democrats. And that good day really is all about the fact that people accepted the results of the people in this country. And that says something given what we saw in 2020. Let's go to Arlette Saenz, who is with the president. He had pep in his step, Arlette. He said he's willing to work across the aisle, but there are some things that are off limits, such as abortion, such as cuts to Medicare and Social Security.
President Biden really extended his victory lap today as he thanked these Democratic staffers for the work they did, saying that not only was it a strong night for democracy, but also showed that democracy is in action. He noted how this is one of the first major elections since that January 6th insurrection and said that there were concerns over how democracy would fare, but he said that it met the test during this election. Now, the president touted some of his Democratic agenda items while also saying that he's willing to work with Republicans, but he's certainly facing a steep hill ahead as Republicans have said that they're against many of the president's proposals and also have vowed possible investigations into his family and administration.
Boris, did you hear any of that? With the music?
Not going to lie, it was hard to hear what Arlette said, but we thank you for being there for us. Thank you so much, Arlette Saenz, live from the DNC event in Washington, D.C. So we were just mentioning that Twitter's top cybersecurity officer quit today. There's drama plaguing the company that Elon Musk just bought. We're going to talk about it in just minutes. Stay with us. So Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter has been just like a soap opera, and in the latest installment, Twitter's chief information officer just quit. Leah Kistner turned in her resignation today and then appropriately announced it on Twitter.
She did not say why she stepped down, but her decision follows mounting concerns about the platform's future under its new owner, Elon Musk. Sarah Fisher is a CNN media analyst and will help make sense of all of this for us. Sarah, please. Every day since Elon Musk has taken over the company has been chaotic, and today is no exception. The cyber chief stepping down. Is there any indication that there is a method to his madness here?
Yeah, well, I think he's really focused on product and nothing else. And that's why people who work in policy, people who work in things like information security, you noted that their chief information security officer had resigned, as did their chief compliance officer. Those types of people are sounding alarms, saying you can't just focus on product and not worry about the safety and the health of the community. I think what's next is that Elon Musk is going to have to start to figure out how does he get money into the company. And it's not just going to be a product fix. He has to listen to advertiser concerns. He has to listen to statements from, lawmakers. The FTC called him out today, and start to figure out how can he get Twitter to a place he wants to get it to without breaking everything in his path.
I think that's a real challenge, right, Sarah? Because I saw CNN's Donny O'Sullivan today pointed out that there are all these verified fake accounts. There was like a fake Jesus Christ account on Twitter. There was a fake Donald Trump account on Twitter. How does he thread the needle of keeping this social media platform, free and viable, and simultaneously fixing it the way that he, at least publicly, says he intends to?
Yeah, so the reason he's trying to get people to pay for verification is because he says that Twitter will only survive an economic downturn if half of its revenue comes from subscriptions and half comes from advertising. But the challenge that you just noted is that if you allow anyone to pay to get verified, of course, there's going to be a lot of spoof accounts, fake accounts, etc. And the ones that I'm the most worried about are not the fake Jesuses and the fake Donald Trumps. It's people faking local law enforcement, first responders accounts. Those people, those departments rely on Twitter in emergencies to get communications out to their constituencies. That's going to be a huge problem for Elon Musk.
Regulators have warned Elon Musk directly that they are watching him, specifically EU regulators there. But what, if any, action can and should regulators in the U.S. be doing?
Well, the first thing is that Twitter has already agreed to what's called a consent decree, meaning that they're going to do certain things to uphold privacy in the U.S. So the Federal Trade Commission, as it made a statement today, will continue to put pressure on Twitter to adhere to rules around user privacy. What other lawmakers can do, members of Congress, et cetera, is they could haul Elon Musk in front of Congress and they could ask him questions about what he plans to do with the business. They could hold hearings. But as far as anything else, I mean, our government pretty much stays out of business with the exception of passing laws. And so Elon Musk pretty much does have free reign unless he triggers so many people in lawmakers in the US and Europe that they decide to start bringing him in for hearings and things like that, you know, in order to enforce rules more.
It would be something to see him hauled before Congress. That is true. Sarah Fisher, thank you.
Before we go, we have a final look at markets as the Dow is surging today following a new report showing that inflation is showing signs of cooling.
CNN's Matt Egan joins us now. So, Matt, what are some of the biggest takeaways from that Consumer Price Report Index?
Well, clearly, huge sigh of relief from Wall Street. I think this shows how desperate investors and really all of us are for any sign of improvement on the inflation front. This was a cooler than expected report, 7.7% year over year. I mean, this is not a good number, but it is certainly a step in the right direction. And it really set off an earthquake on Wall Street, 1,100 points, 3.6% gain for the Dow. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, they're on track for their best day in over 2 years. Now, I don't think that we should say that, you know, inflation is going away or is healthy by any stretch of the imagination. But I think investors clearly see this as a sign that the Fed may be winning a battle in this war against inflation. And that would obviously be good news for all of us.
It's worth noting, this is just one day.
It is just one day and just one inflation report. The Fed is going to need to see another inflation report that goes in the right direction and probably more after that before they really stop slamming the brakes on the economy.
Hopefully the trend is heading in the right direction, though.
Hopefully.
Matt, good to see you. Thank you.
Well, Bianna, it was a pleasure to join you today. Hopefully, well, actually, we're going to do it again tomorrow,
Should we
right?
do it tomorrow? I was going to say, are you about to tell me something?
Well, you got to teach me how to say good afternoon in Russian.
We'll do that after the show.
Thanks so much for spending your afternoon with us. CNN special coverage of election night in America begins in just seconds.
Good afternoon. I'm Erin Burnett, and this is CNN's special coverage of election night in America, continued yet again. Right now, control of the Senate could come down to just 2 states. They are Arizona and Nevada. And with millions of votes already counted, the Senate races in these 2 states are still too close to call. And then there's the third pivotal Senate race, that one in Georgia. Already, we know, headed for a runoff. That is on December 6th. But there may be more clarity in the coming hours. More votes are going to be coming in tonight. So first, let's look at Arizona, the race there between the Democratic Senator Mark Kelly and the Republican nominee Blake Masters. Right now, Mark Kelly, the incumbent, is ahead by 99,638 votes. But you see what is so important there. Only 76% of the estimated vote is in. We have a lot more votes to come in Arizona. And that razor-thin race for governor between the Democrat Katie Hobbs and the Republican Kari Lake also still up for grabs. That one is incredibly close. Right now, the margin only 16,000 plus votes for Katie Hobbs. But there are 665,000 more votes that need to be counted. That's why these races are way too close to call. Let me show you where those are. 400,000 of those outstanding votes are in Maricopa County. That is Phoenix. 148,000 are down in Pima County, home to Tucson. We are standing by to hear from officials in both Maricopa and Pima County over these next minutes, and we're going to bring you those press conferences when they happen. Now let me show you the situation in Nevada, where all eyes are on the crucial race there. That is the Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto against Adam Laxalt, the Republican challenger, neck and neck. Only 16,000 votes, just shy of that, separate the two. Let me give you the context there. 120,000 votes still need to be counted in Nevada. So that is too close to call, and we are expecting more results on that tonight. Now, these two races are so crucial because if Democrats can pull off a win in both of them, Democrats control the Senate. And when I say that, that means they control the Senate regardless of the outcome in next month's Senate runoff in Georgia. So we have reporters on the ground in these crucial races as America waits for the outcome. Gary Tuchman is in Nevada. Josh Campbell is in Arizona. I want to start in Nevada, though, with you, Gary. I know you're in Las Vegas near the election where they're counting these outstanding ballots. What is it, about 120,000 in races that are simply too close to call?
Well, that's right, Aaron, and mail-in ballots continue to be counted in all 17 counties in Nevada. There is nothing unusual about that whatsoever. If the race wasn't close, if it was 50% percentage point difference, either way, the votes would still be counted because they have up until Saturday for ballots to arrive. That's the rules here in the state of Nevada. Here in Clark County, though, this is where people are keeping their eyes on because 75% of the population of Nevada lives in this county where Las Vegas is located. We were just told during a news conference there are still about 50,000 votes to be counted. Those votes come from the mail and also come from buckets, baskets that were put in the polling places, boxes. We saw a basket in one place that had a lock on it, but there were 300 boxes throughout this county, and that's what's being counted right now. Now, in addition to the 50,000, there are 5,555 provisional ballots, 7,155 ballots that need to be cured. That's a total of 12,710 ballots that could be counted. So there's a grand total of more than 62,000 votes that could still be counted in this county, and then you have the other counties also. Now, as I've mentioned, not a big surprise at all. They're still counting 1.8 million registered voters in Nevada. Every one of them was sent a mail-in ballot, and here in this county, it was the most popular way to vote, and everyone was told as long as it's postmarked by Tuesday, it can arrive by Saturday. Nevertheless, this probably is not a big surprise. The former president of the United States, Donald Trump, on his Truth Social app, said that Clark County has a corrupt voting system. I can tell you that the people here, the election bosses, are not at all happy about that disrespect.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. All right. Well, Gary Tuchman there in Nevada. And I want to head now to Arizona, where we are waiting for more results as well, which could be coming soon. As I said, there you've got, what, 600,000+ votes outstanding. Josh Campbell is in Phoenix at an election center. And Josh, I know, right, they are counting these ballots. They're going to update us. We anticipate a couple of press briefings, at least over these next few hours, where we could get more information on the count. What are we still waiting on?
That's right. Two key areas where I am here now in Maricopa County. This is the largest highly populated area in the state of Arizona. And then south of us, the second most populous county is Pima County. First, starting with Maricopa, we're still waiting on 400,000 ballots. That includes 290,000 ballots that were received in envelopes by voters, but they actually didn't submit by mail. They brought them to polling places, which is fine. We've heard different reasons why people decided to do that. Some of them hadn't made up their mind yet on who they wanted to vote for. Others thought it would be more secure to physically hand that to an election worker, but that means that it's going to take time to vote. Again, we're waiting for 290,000 ballots there in Maricopa County. South near Tucson, we're still waiting on 160,000 votes there, but we're told, Aaron, that that could come maybe later next week. So it's still a lot of ballot counting yet to be done. As you mentioned, we're also waiting to get updated by election officials, both here in Maricopa and in Pima County. That's scheduled for the 4 p.m. local time hour. We're expecting here in Maricopa an additional batch of ballots to be released tonight. Yesterday, we received 62,000 ballots updated. We'll see what tonight brings. But, of course, as you look at the numbers in these races, still these razor-thin majorities. As you mentioned, with Mark Kelly up to over 95,000 votes over Blake Masters, and in the gubernatorial race, obviously much closer. Katie Hobbs up about 13,000 votes over Carrie Lake.
Yeah, right. But of course, when you would put that in the context of 600,000 outstanding, we all can understand we simply just don't know the winners yet. Josh Campbell, thank you very much. So, as I said, we're going to be getting press conferences in both Arizona and Nevada throughout these next hours. Right now, I want to go to John King at the Magic Wall. So, John, you look at these two states and these vast troughs of votes still outstanding. Where does the fight for control of the Senate then stand at this hour?
So let's go into the states individually first. Well, before I do that, you make the key point. So we have 49-48. That's where we are right now. The current United States Senate is 50-50. So I can give you a scenario. We know Georgia will have a runoff on December 6th. There's a scenario in which Republicans could have control regardless of Georgia. There's a scenario where Democrats could have control regardless of Georgia, or there's a scenario where Georgia once again decides control of the Senate. We'll go through that in a moment. Let's first just look at these states, and let's follow up on what you were hearing from Gary and from Josh. Number one, in Nevada, when I went to bed early this morning, kind of middle early this morning, I guess it was. It's hard to remember when you're on day 3. Adam Laxalt was leading in Washoe County. I bring up Washoe County because it's a swing county, northwest corner of the state. It's about 15% of the population. Clark County, where Vegas is much bigger. But this is important, Aaron, in terms of Nevada politics, in that it's viewed as the swing county, and the winner here often wins statewide. Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democratic incumbent, leading now, but look at that, 48.8 to 48.6. That is what we were talking about in terms of the closeness of the contest here. Come out to statewide, 49.4 to 47.6. You'd rather be ahead than behind at any point in the race, but as Gary noted, 120,000 or so more ballots. Adam Laxalt obviously in the lead by 15,000 right now statewide. Senator Cortez Masto has to make that up. For her, the advantage is if you go to the red rural counties, most of the vote is in. They're smaller anyway. And Clark County is 74% of the vote statewide, 74% of the population. It'll be somewhere in that ballpark of the vote statewide. Senator Cortez Masto is already ahead in Clark County. So she's behind statewide a little bit, but ahead in Clark County. That's where most of the votes are still to be counted. So we're not done here. And there's reason for the Democrats to think the math allows us to pull it out. And then when you come over, as Josh just said, this is the statewide count right now. Yeah. Mark Kelly just shy of 100,000 votes, but with hundreds of thousands more to be counted. Let's be patient. We got to walk through this one.
All right, so there's the Senate, as you talk about, and patience is a huge virtue in the situation we're in right now. Obviously, Democrats have a chance of holding the Senate even without waiting for the Georgia runoff, though. I mean, I guess that's, if you do the math, right? You get 2, you've got it.
That's what we're doing. We're doing a lot of math. And we're going to be doing math. We're going to be doing math for at least, well, December 6th. We'll be doing the final math here. The question is, how consequential is it? Obviously, to the citizens of Georgia, their next United States Senator is consequential. But let's get to the point you were just making. Here's where we are right now in terms of the races we have called. Again, 49 Republican seats, 48 Democratic seats. Those on the ballot this year and those already called. So what happens out here? If Mark Kelly holds his lead in Arizona, not guaranteed, but we're doing a hypothetical, if he holds his lead there, and Senator Cortez Masto can come back and take the lead and win Nevada, then for the Democrats, Georgia would be gravy. And the Democrats only need 50 to control the United States Senate because they have Vice President Harris. So Georgia then would be, can we get to 51? And Senator Harris could leave Washington a little bit more. She wouldn't have to be around to break all those tie votes. That's one consequence of that. So yes, Democrats can win their majority, protect their majority without Georgia. However, I just want to put on the table, Republicans can also win the majority without Georgia. If Senator Laxalt holds on and Blake Masters comes back in Arizona, he's trailing right now, but we're still counting hundreds of thousands of votes, Republicans could get to 51. And Georgia, maybe Democrats get to 49 or Republicans get to 42. That's why this is so consequential. These two races out here will determine how consequential Georgia is on December 6th. That's why we're going to count these votes. And if you're a Democrat or a Republican, whether you live in those states or whether you care about the balance of power here where I work in Washington, these are tense times, and they will be tense days, I believe, before we know the answer.
Yeah, they are going to be definitely tense days, as we said, with 600,000 votes outstanding. We do anticipate more coming in tonight, but not all. And this is a case where you're going to need virtually all to make these calls. All right, thank you so much, John King. And Republican Senate candidates in Nevada and Arizona both threw in their lot with Trump and the election deniers. So just ahead, what happens if they win? Welcome back to CNN special election coverage. Election night in America continued. President Biden moments ago saying democracy met the test on Election Day.
Here's what we do know. We lost fewer seats in the House of Representatives than any Democratic president's first elected midterm, at least 40 years. We had the best midterms for governors since 1986. And experts said we couldn't beat the odds, but we did beat the odds.
Well, all eyes, of course, are still on Arizona and Nevada. And as we've made clear, control of the Senate could hinge on just these two states, right? Never mind that Georgia runoff. In both states, the Republican candidate for Senate has questioned the 2020 election. CNN's Brian Todd joins me now with more. And, Brian, obviously, this has been a real question about whether this election was a referendum on the Democratic agenda or on the Republican election denialism. Tell us more about these candidates in Arizona and Nevada and their record on denying the 2020 election.
Right, Aaron. We want to focus on the most prominent election deniers and start, as you mentioned, in those states where deniers can still win those really important races for senator, governor, and secretary of state. One of the most well-known and aggressive deniers in Arizona, Republican Kari Lake, still in a tightly contested race for governor. She's falsely declared that President Biden's win there in 2020 was stolen and demanded that this year that Biden's 2020 win in Arizona be decertified, which is an impossibility. Another denier, Republican Blake Masters, still in that close race in Arizona for senator. Now let's go to Nevada. A tight race could put denier Adam Laxalt in office as a U.S. senator. Laxalt's made several false claims about the 2020 election, saying it was rigged, and he's made baseless claims about the integrity of the vote count in that state. But there are also some very important races, Aaron, for Secretary of State in Arizona and Nevada that have not been called yet. These are critical because the Secretary of State basically runs the election process in most states. And in those two states, aggressive election deniers are still in the running. In Nevada, Jim Marchant could be on the cusp of victory. He has insisted that it was, quote, almost statistically impossible that Joe Biden won in Nevada in 2020, which is flat out wrong. And he's claimed that election winners in Nevada since 2006 have been, quote, installed by the deep state cabal. In Arizona, Mark Finchem is still in a tight race for Secretary of State. He's called for the arrests of Democrats who were involved in overseeing the 2020 election. These are men, Aaron, who could be running elections and certifying results in those crucial states.
All right, so amazing to think about the situation there. And obviously, those are the votes that are outstanding. Who are when we try to look at whether this was a referendum on election denialism overall, obviously there were many people who denied the 2020 election who were running across this country for various positions, Secretary of State, Senator, Congressperson. Who are the prominent deniers who have already won or lost?
Well, Aaron, one of the big winners among the deniers, J.D. Vance. He's going to be the next Republican senator from Ohio. Vance has claimed that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump and claimed that people were voting illegally on a large-scale basis, both completely false claims. Among the prominent losers among the deniers, Don Bolduc, the Senate candidate from New Hampshire, and Doug Mastriano, the gubernatorial candidate from Pennsylvania. His campaign chartered buses to Donald Trump's rally in Washington on January 6th, and Mastriano was photographed on the Capitol grounds that day, but he was never charged with anything.
All right. Thank you very much, Brian. So now let's bring in our panel. Today, Stead Herndon, national political reporter at the New York Times, joins John Avlon, our senior political analyst, Ashley Allison, the former National Coalition's director for the Biden-Harris 2020 presidential campaign, and Jonah Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Dispatch. So, Ashley, many Republican election deniers did lose, okay? Not all, and not even some prominent ones we don't know. Many of them, though, did. The few that have not been called, obviously, you heard Brian go through them, some of the highly consequential ones, including Secretary of State, right, in Arizona and Nevada. Are you surprised that those races are still so close? And frankly, those could be states where the votes appear to be split between election deniers, maybe, and Democrats, which is a strange thing to imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised that ticket splitting happened this election cycle. We've seen it in other states. But Nevada and Arizona always take a long time to count. It's unfortunate. We see states like Pennsylvania, who I expected it to go a little longer in Pennsylvania, but they got it done quickly. Florida got it done, my home state of Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. You also look at who their secretaries of states are. In Pennsylvania, you have Lee Chapman, who is a strong secretary of state. In Michigan, you have Jocelyn Benson, who's a strong secretary of state. In Ohio, you have LaRose, who I don't always agree on his approach to how people should vote, but these are people who are running really strong elections. But for some reason, Nevada and Arizona, it takes a long time to vote, but I do appreciate right now that they are taking the time and they are letting every vote count, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so Jonah, one of the most vocal election deniers is in a race that is too close to call. You know, look, I don't know what she would do, win or lose, but one can imagine some pretty bizarre situations, right? You win by 2 votes and you're okay, but if you lose by 2 votes, it's rigged. I don't know. But we're talking about Congresswoman Lauren Boebert. Here's some of what she said about the 2020 election.
The members who stand here today and accept the results of this concentrated, coordinated, partisan effort by Democrats, where every fraudulent vote cancels out the vote of an honest America, has sided with the extremist left.
Millions of ballots were mailed out illegally right in front of all of our faces. That right there is what rigged this election.
Right now, Jonah, she's ahead by 794 votes, right? Our graphics that we put up are dynamic. So that number changes constantly. But right now, she's up by 794 votes. She could win.
She could win, and, you know, a couple things. Well, first of all, I personally think she's a couple fries short of a Happy Meal, right? I mean, she's a kind of crazy person. She was in Congress for 2020. And my point is that I repudiate all the election denying. I don't think anyone should be doing it. I think it's irresponsible. But the biggest election denier in the entire country in our lifetimes was Donald Trump. And he couldn't pull off stealing an election. People make this leap that everyone who's an election denier will be 100% committed to cheating once they actually get the job. And we've actually seen a lot of people who, you know, Brian Bolduc changed his mind about election denying a couple times because when he looked at the facts, he kind of wanted to be seen mainstream and all that.
Yeah.
My only point is, look, I don't trust Kari Lake. I don't trust these secretaries of state. Shame on them for what they are doing. But it is not obvious, because I think Biden's framing of democracy was on the ballot was ridiculous and dangerous and stupid. But it is just not obvious that just because you denied the election, you're going to be capable of stealing one the next time around. The courts still exist. Journalists still exist. And I just think it's one of these things that it's not proven. Doesn't mean we have to celebrate it or not worry about it, but you have to keep an eye on them. It just doesn't necessarily mean that all these people are going to try and steal an election. And remember, the guy who tried to steal the election the hardest failed because the institutions of democracy held.
You're right, they did. I mean,
that's also a rosy view of 2020. I would say that the institutions of democracy held on by a questionable amount. I don't think that there's something like January 6th we cannot gloss over.
I'm not glossing it over.
No. As a real blow to the heart of transfer of power, that was a real violent action. But I also think we should be clear that it wasn't just election denialism that hurt Republicans in these races. It was a whole view of extremism that voters took from that party. It was not only denying the last results. We're talking about Mastriano and Boebert, two people who have embraced the term Christian nationalism, who have gone further in terms of saying that the church should be directing politics of the state. I think all of those things added up to a view that hurt some of those people in this elections. I do think it's right that for voters, it is not a clear line to say that, oh, if you question the results from 2020, you're inherently Donald Trump. I do think there has been some conflation of that. And when I talk to Republican voters, that's not a distinction. That's not a line that's not a two that they put together. But I do think it adds up to a view that the Republican Party has moved into an extremist lens that has hurt them in some places.
And yet in Arizona, John, I mean, again, you know, doing the John King hypothetical, you could end up in a world where Mark Kelly is your senator and Kari Lake is your governor.
Yeah.
And whoa, that's amazing to imagine those two things happening at the same place.
And normally I like ticket splitting because I think it shows a degree of independence of judgment. I think what Kari Lake is different.
That would perhaps show a schizophrenia.
It may very well. And I think the reason Kari Lake is in a different position than, say, a Tudor Dixon in Michigan is because she had been a local news anchor for 20 years.
Yeah, very
so
well
she
known.
was known across the state with a high name ID in a different way than some of these people who had no business running for Senate except for the fact they're willing to loudly parrot Donald Trump's election lies. And I still think the macro message of the election, and Tim Alberta in The Atlantic put this very well, is that voters prefer out of touch to out of their mind.
Yeah. Right. Well, and we should say, Jonah, you know, Tudor Dixon, you bring her up in the case of Michigan and Gretchen Whitmer, election denier conceded. And we have seen concessions, right? From in both sides in tight races, we have seen concessions, right? Stacey Abrams conceded, Lee Zeldin conceded, Tudor Dixon conceded. You know, and I know there are some who say, well, we shouldn't celebrate what should be mundane, but I kind of think we should.
Yeah, no, I think this is all should be celebrated, and I think people forget there's sort of an antibody response. Even in the polls about, you know, Joe Biden said that 70% of Americans think there's a threat to democracy. half of those people thought the threat to democracy came from Democrats. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying that everybody out there, there are very few people out there actually saying democracy is bad. They're just saying they think because of our age of polarization and conspiracy theory, they think the other side cheats.
But I don't. I just do think democracy was on the ballot as well as other things. I think it is fair to think that if someone is saying, if you saw Boebert on the floor of Congress saying all of this is a conspiracy, that they would do things. Just because you weren't successful doesn't mean you're not going to try and cheat.
Oh, yeah, I think she's terrible for the Republican brand. I mean, she literally said over the summer that Jesus should have asked God for an AR-15 to protect herself from the government, which is a lot of theological violence right there if you start to play that through.
All right, all stay with me. Some chronological issues as well. Okay, all right, coming up, with control of the Senate still up in the air, we're going to dive into the outstanding vote count in that Arizona race with our political director, David Chalian. Plus, the top official in Arizona's Maricopa County, right? Arizona with 600,000 votes outstanding. The official of the most populous county with the most votes out will join us as well. All right, this is CNN's special coverage of election night in America continued. And again, hundreds of thousands of votes are still uncounted in Arizona, with control of the Senate hanging in balance. We're waiting to hear from officials in 2 Arizona counties that have the most outstanding votes. That is Maricopa, home to Phoenix, and Pima, home to Tucson. We're going to bring that to you live. At this moment, the Democratic incumbent Senator Mark Kelly is ahead of his Trump-backed Republican opponent Blake Masters, just barely, as you can see, by just under 100,000 votes. I say just barely because 600,000 votes are still outstanding. So let's talk about that. Our political director, David Chalian, joins me now. So, David, I said about 600,000. Where are those votes? What are those votes? Are we sure that is the sum total of the outstanding votes?
Well, I just want to make sure, Aaron, that I am presenting to you the latest information that we have right now in Arizona about the outstanding vote. Yep. I can't see the graphic you're presenting on air, but it is approximately 665,000 votes that we have deemed remain uncounted. And so what we look at with that is, okay, well, then what would Blake Masters need of the uncounted vote, the remaining vote? What percentage of that would he need to overtake Mark Kelly and win this race? What would Mark Kelly need? So Masters would need in a range of somewhere between 52 and 56% of that outstanding roughly 665,000 votes that are to be counted in Arizona. Mark Kelly, who's obviously ahead, would need less in order to keep that and win. He needs about 42 to 46% of the remaining vote to secure victory in this race. So it's just a guide as you see more Arizona vote come in later today. What are the percentages between the candidates? How is that vote splitting? And is Masters hitting that need number he would need to overtake here and win?
So we know many Democrats were concerned that President Biden's low approval numbers could hurt them. So in Arizona, as you're trying to, figure out what people felt when they went into the polls, what do the exit polls in Arizona tell you?
So in Arizona, the president's approval rating, as it is nationally, is underwater, according to the exit polls. Arizona voters in this election, 43% approve of Joe Biden's job performance, 57% disapprove. It's like a tick below where he is nationally, which would make sense in a more purple battleground state. What about the opinions of Biden's policies and whether they're helping or hurting the country? 52% of Arizona voters say Biden's policies are hurting the country. A majority, a slim majority. 34% helping, 14% not making a difference. I'll just say, you would think, well, that's got to be good news for Blake Masters, and yet he's running behind here. Yes, but Mark Kelly also carved out a separate identity from Joe Biden a bit, so he may not have been as much of a weight. And then we asked, of course, Aaron, about election confidence, your vote in Arizona. It's sort of the hotbed of election denialism, as you know. Well, look at this. 43% of Arizona voters say they're very confident that the state's elections are fair and accurate. 30% say somewhat confident. So nearly 3/4 of Arizona voters in this election are somewhat or very confident that the elections are fair and accurate. And yet, when we asked, did you think Joe Biden legitimately won the 2020 election? I mean, you just see the divide in American politics here right now. 63% of Arizona voters say yes, Biden was legitimately elected. 35%, a third of the electorate in Arizona, does not believe, wrongly, that Joe Biden was legitimately elected. So what about the views of Donald Trump in Arizona, a battleground state? How does it compare to Biden's approval rating? Well, the views aren't great for Donald Trump either. He's at 42% favorable in Arizona, 57% unfavorable, kind of in the ballpark of where Joe Biden's approval ratings are. So Donald Trump is also upside down in this critical battleground state, Aaron.
Oh, it's amazing just to look at that and see, when we match it up, when we finally know the outcome, how does it fit or not fit? With some of those exit polls, right? I'm sure some of these things will be confounding. All right, David Chalian, thank you so very much. Sure. So let's go to Bill Gates now. He is the Republican chairman of the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. And Chairman Gates, I appreciate talking to you again. We've talked many times over these past couple of years, and here we are again with you in the midst of a big count, and all eyes of the nation are on you. I know you are going to release more votes tonight. So from Maricopa County, how many ballot results do you expect to release this evening?
Well, Aaron, thanks for having me. And we're not sure on the exact number. We did 62,000 last evening. It'll be more than that, but not significantly more.
Okay, more than 62, but not significantly more. And just trying to understand what that will be relative to your denominator of total outstanding. How many are still outstanding in Maricopa County total, including that number you expect to release tonight?
Yeah, currently outstanding, we have just a little bit over 400,000 ballots.
All right, so let me ask you, just drill down on that a little bit more, because I know you want to be as transparent as possible. Yesterday morning, there were about 300,000 votes left to count in your county. That's what you told us. Then later that morning, that number went up, 400,000. As you said, you did release some results last night of about 62,000 votes. But then today you told Sarah Seidner, who, as you know, of course, is out there with you, our reporter who's covering this, you said there's still about 400,000 votes remaining. Can you explain, so we can all understand better, why the numbers appear to keep changing?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's a great question. So when I gave that 300,000 number, that would have been yesterday morning, that was based on an estimate of the number of people who dropped off early ballots on Election Day. That was consistent with the high numbers that we had seen in the past. Well, yesterday we determined how many ballots had been dropped off by people, early ballots had been dropped off on Election Day, and it was a number we'd never seen before. 290,000 ballots were dropped off on Election Day. That's 70% more than the previous record. So that's why I was low on those numbers yesterday. That was an estimate. I told the folks that, but it surprised us, and that's what gets us to that, like I said, 400, a little bit over 400,000. We're very confident with that number now, and from this point, we're going to go down as we have the numbers released this evening, and then you'll be seeing those over the next few days.
Right. Okay. So tonight will be the 400 minus the, as you said, more than 62,000 votes, a little bit more than that you'll anticipate releasing tonight. So look, you're in the sense two incredibly narrow races, right? Your Senate race with Mark Kelly is very close, but your governor's race is much, much closer. Only 17,000 votes right now. As you know, Bill, separate Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake. That is a 0.8 percentage point difference. Kari Lake had some very strong criticism today about how long, she says it's long, that it's taking to count the vote. And in your county, here she is.
They're dragging their feet and they're slow rolling the results, and they're trying to delay the inevitable. This is just an embarrassment, and the people of Arizona are sick and tired of elections being run like we're in some banana republic. I have very little faith in some of the people that are operating that Maricopa County elections. I think they're incompetent.
You're obviously the supervisor in charge of the Maricopa County elections. What do you say to Kari Lake, who's out there saying this today as you count?
Well, I can understand why Kari Lake might be surprised by how long this is taking, because she probably hasn't followed elections the way that I have for the last 20 years in this state. I was actually one of the lawyers in charge of Republican observation of elections for years. I can remember 16 years ago, I sat outside of that same counting center. I was there in a close congressional race. I was there for days waiting for the final results. That's how it works here in Arizona. When folks are dropping off 290,000 ballots on election day in a ballot envelope, those don't magically get counted. We have to verify those. I'm sure Kari Lake cares about only eligible votes being counted just like I do, just like all of us Republicans and any good American or any good Arizonan would. So here's the reality. Those ballots from Tuesday, 290,000, now you need to bring them into our center. They have to be signature verified, each and every one of those, making sure that the signature on the outside of that envelope is the same signature that's in our voter registration files. That takes a while. We have experts who examine this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work involved in this. We're going as fast as we can, but accuracy matters.
Yes, it does, to get every single one right. All right, Bill Gates, thank you so very much. I appreciate you taking the time, and you heard it from him, anticipating more than 62,000 votes coming out in these next hours. Thanks again. And as we wait to hear more from Arizona, did Republicans lose votes this year by losing sight of moderates? I'm going to ask our senior data reporter, Harry Enton, when we come right back. We are back with election night in America continued. So much second guessing going on for Republicans about why their performance in House and Senate races did not match their lofty expectations. Now, some are blaming former President Trump. The Republican Senator Josh Hawley today is blaming Republican leaders in Washington. Well, our senior data reporter Harry Enton joins us now with other reasons. So, Harry, what do you think happened? And why don't we start here in the Senate?
Bad candidates. It's bad candidates. It's extreme candidates. You know, we asked an interesting question in our exit poll, which essentially said, okay, for the Democratic candidate in these Senate races, do you think that their views are too extreme? And we also asked it for the Republican candidates as well. And what we found in all but one state, there were any of the competitive states, more people said that the Republican candidate was extreme than the Democratic candidate was extreme. And this is, we've been talking about this the entire time, right? President Biden has this low approval rating, but the GOP candidates in the minds of voters were not particularly strong. And I think that is ultimately what happened in the Senate, was it was bad candidates and it cost the Republicans.
Right. In that space, in that void, had you put in good candidates, maybe things would be dramatically different than what we're talking about. Okay, what else did you find as you've been scouring through the exit polls, the information that we do have, that stood out to you?
So our National House exit poll, look among independents.
So this is House races.
This is House races. Look among independents and look at who they voted for. They voted for Democrats by 2 percentage points. You might say that's a small margin, but look historically at how independents voted, whether for the president's party or the opposition party. In every single House election midterm since 2006, they overwhelmingly voted for the opposition party by double digits. All of a sudden this time around, despite the fact that independent voters did not like Joe Biden, they voted for the president's party. In my opinion, what happened was the Republican candidates were so interested in appeasing their base, they completely forgot about the middle, and the middle said, you know what, forget it. We're going with the Democrats, even if we don't like Joe Biden.
It's incredible, because when you look at those margins, if you were to even be in line with history, right, you would have been 20 points different than you were right now.
Yeah.
Well, okay, anywhere between 15.
Yeah, 15.
15. But that would be a red tsunami. That would have been a red tsunami, but that is not what happened.
That's exactly right. If they just matched recent history, the Republicans would have easily taken back the House. Instead, at this point, they probably will. But the fact that it's still too close to call as we're sitting here on Thursday, I think says it all. Democrats did much better than expected.
All right. Harry, thank you very much. Pretty incredible to look at that history there. Okay, coming up, more on the Republican blame game. This time, Republican finger pointing at former President Trump. So does it stick this time? Does it stick, or does it just blow over again? Welcome back to CNN special coverage. Election night in America continued. President Biden today speaking, renewing his promise to work across the aisle with Republicans, adding, though, that compromise, in his view, goes both ways.
I'm prepared to work with Republicans, but the American people have made it clear they expect Republicans to work with me as well.
John Avlon and Ested Herndon are back with me. Ested, I just raise a point here. A congressman told me recently, a Democratic one, it would be better for Republicans to pick up 20 or 25 seats because then moderates on the Republican Party would have some influence. That if it was an eke it out sort of win, the crazy extremists would control McCarthy. That's the scenario we're looking at if Republicans do indeed take the House.
That's
that it would be
absolutely
tiny.
the scenario we're looking at. And it's a kind of weird irony of this election where the electorate does, I think to President Biden's point, made a kind of clear statement about the way the Republican Party was moving, where at the same time, because of that slim majority, it is up to Kevin McCarthy, if he does take the speakership, to kind of realm his caucus in to match that. I don't think that's a given, though. We have seen Republicans in close elections over the last 4 to 5 years not use that as a chance to moderate. So yes, the party's kind of having this open question right now, thinking, maybe Donald Trump dragged us down. But that could just be about election denialism. That could just be about Donald Trump as an individual. There is no guarantee that the kind of grievances he embodied goes away or the willingness to bipartisanship shows up.
No. I mean, look, they'd already talked about what their agenda would be. Now we'll see. But, it was a lot of investigations and possible impeachments of the president and his party. John, you have talked and spent so much time focusing on independent voters, right? So Harry just talked about how independent voters really broke with every historical trend that exists and voted for the party in power as opposed to the opposition. What do you make of this?
This is what I've been obsessing over because it is absolutely fascinating. Harry laid out the historic numbers, but typically a midterm opposition election is a double-digit swing to the opposition party in the midterms. That didn't happen. And here you see they actually voted for Democrats by 2 points. And I think that accounts for the evaporation of the red wave because they were not able to capitalize on independent voters. Democrats won moderate voters 56%, and they were 40% of the electorate according to our exit polls. So if you lose the middle, if independents turn against you because they don't trust you, because they think you're too extreme, that is a clear, resounding warning. And just a contrast between the two parties right now. And so Republicans are going to have to recognize that this is not just about Trump and the election denials, although that's the marquee point. If you let the inmates run the asylum, it's going to continue to compound this problem.
Amazing. Somehow, though, by stunting the red wave, you end up with extremists having more power. That is the ultimate bizarreness of American politics. All right, thank you both so very much. And in just over an hour, we're going to have news conferences from Arizona's 2 biggest counties about those vote totals, right? Where I told you about 600,000 votes are still outstanding. Just ahead, what that could mean for those incredibly razor-thin races there and control of the House and Senate. Our special coverage, Election Night in America, continues in a moment. The final votes in the final states are being counted as we speak. Welcome back to CNN special coverage of Election Night in America continued. I'm Erin Burnett, and we are standing by for a new batch of votes to be posted from 2 states, Arizona and Nevada. These are the 2 states with Senate races still up for grabs that really will probably determine who controls the Senate. Of course, it could go all the way to that runoff in Georgia. But get ready, because the most populous county in Arizona, Maricopa, is expected to release more results there. The top official there, Bill Gates in Maricopa County, just telling me that they're about to release results of a little bit more than 62,000 ballots that could provide more clarity in that Senate race between the Democratic Senator Mark Kelly, who currently holds a lead over the Republican nominee Blake Masters in the counting. Masters, just a short time ago in a fundraising email, writing that he is, quote, expecting a contested road forward and legal battles to come. And in Arizona overall, there are 665,000 votes still outstanding. So a lot more to be counted. About 400,000 of those are in Maricopa County. 148,000 are in Pima County. That is where Tucson is. And officials for both counties are going to be holding news conferences over the next hour. Now, let me bring you to Nevada. This is the other one we're watching here. Adam Laxalt currently ahead, but as you can see, only 84% of the vote is in right now. The Democratic incumbent, Catherine Cortez Masto, is lagging, but 120,000 votes still have to be counted, so we just don't know. We are expecting more of those votes to come in tonight. And as you can see, both parties still within reach of controlling the Senate. If Democrats win Arizona and Nevada, they'll have 50 seats without Georgia, which of course is heading to that runoff now on December 6th. Right now, Kyung Lah is there in Arizona. Gary Tuchman is in Nevada. Jeremy Diamond is at the White House. I want to begin with you in Arizona, Kyung. And obviously, we've got anticipating an update here. You've got some more information on some of these votes outstanding right now.
Well, Aaron, you just got exactly how much they anticipate that they will be releasing tonight. We're getting a little more clarity on exactly what kind of votes are being counted and will be released as far as the overall tally. We are being told by Maricopa County, the Elections Department, that the types of ballots that are going to be included in tonight's release are ballots counted from Saturday night, Sunday, and most of Monday. So these are ballots, early ballots before actual election day. And we also got an update from the tabulation process. So what is happening as of just about 30 minutes ago, that 17,000 so-called box 3 ballots, they're actually being processed behind me. That process has just begun. Those box 3 ballots will not be included in tonight's tally. They anticipate, the Elections Department anticipates that that will be a part of tomorrow's tally. So it is still happening. It is slow, but the county says the reason why is they want to make sure this entire process is accurate, and we keep getting these updates almost hourly from the county, and we anticipate a little bit more information when Bill Gates does hold his news briefing with reporters here at the Elections Department. I'm also getting a flurry of responses from the various campaigns. On the Republican side, the Kari Lake campaign says for them, the conditions haven't changed. Their position and posture has not changed until they start counting those Tuesday ballots, which again will not be a part of tonight's release. At least that's the anticipation. The Mark Kelly campaign, we did get a statement from the campaign manager who says, quote, "We remain confident that we will win this race." And as far as Katie Hobbs, their campaign, even though it is so close with the Kari Lake campaign, says that they are still feeling very good. Aaron?
This is incredible to watch a race like this that is going on with, as we know, 665,000 votes outstanding. Absolutely amazing. All right, Kyung Lah, thank you very much from Maricopa County. Let's go now to the White House, where President Biden is obviously incredibly closely watching the results from both Arizona and Nevada. Jeremy Diamond is there. And Jeremy, I understand the president spoke this afternoon to staffers at the DNC. What was that about?
Yeah, that's right, Aaron. If you just listened to the top of the president's remarks today, you would be forgiven for thinking that Democrats swept the floor in these midterm elections. There was a celebratory atmosphere. You heard the president express that sense of vindication once again about defying the historical odds in these midterms, arguing that Americans support his agenda. The reality, of course, is that Democrats are likely to lose the House. And that is a reality, Aaron, that Democrats here at the White House are very clear-eyed about, very much gearing up for. And that's why in the second half of the president's speech, you heard him talk about how he would deal with Republicans. Listen.
Regardless of what the final tally showed, I'm prepared to work with Republicans. But the American people have made it clear they expect Republicans to work with me as well. But I've also made it really clear that if Republicans try to repeal the power we just gave Medicare to reduce prescription drug costs, I will veto it and let it happen. If Republicans try to walk away from the historic commitment we just made to deal with the climate crisis, I will not let that happen. If Republicans try to cut Social Security and Medicare, I will not let that happen.
And now, Aaron, when I asked the White House press secretary earlier today where exactly the president would be willing to compromise, she couldn't point to any specific areas, but the president was very specific in trying to draw those red lines, talking about the issues that he would veto. And so the big takeaway from this speech today is that this is a president gearing up for the very high possibility of a Republican House who's trying to project strength, who's trying to show the leverage that he has as he prepares for the possibility of divided government and the many negotiations to follow. Aaron?
Jeremy, thank you. So now to John King. He is at the wall. And John, so here we are waiting for some updates, and we do expect that we're going to be getting live updates from both Nevada and Arizona, as well as, you know, a significant chunk of votes from Arizona tonight. But when it comes to the House, neither party has reached 218 seats, and that's what it takes for control. Now, the way everybody's talking about this, obviously we understand Republicans are much closer to that mark than Democrats right now, as you see it, right?
Yes, but, and let me add the but, and let's walk through it. It is mathematically possible, I wouldn't say probable, but it's mathematically possible Democrats hold their majority, and the fact that we are having that conversation on Thursday after Tuesday Election Day, this is not the conversation and this is not the map that Kevin McCarthy and Republicans expected out of this election. So right now, Republicans are leading in 222 races. Democrats are leading in 213. If we were done right now, Republicans would have a gain of 10 seats and they would have a very narrow House Republican majority if it ended right now. But we're not right now. This is leading. Look at the races we have called. Republicans have 209 to 192 for the Democrats. So Republicans, you need 218 for the majority. So they're just 8 seats away from winning a House majority. But that would be a very narrow House majority, even if they got to the 222. But they could get higher than that. It could be lower than that. So if you look at the map, I just want to walk through it a little bit. 209 right now to 192 called races, right?
Yeah.
So then you come over to the uncalled races here, and Democrats are leading in 21, and Republicans are leading in 13. And Aaron, they run coast to coast. Jared Golden's district in northern Maine, this district has ranked choice voting. It's going to take a while to figure it out. He's just shy of 50% right now as they keep counting the vote. If he can end over 50%, ranked choice voting doesn't kick in. But this one could be a long time before we get that. And you can go from northern Maine all the way to Southern California to Alaska. So we have more races to count. The final tally is going to take days. It could even take a couple of weeks. Will we know a House majority in the next day or two? It's possible. It's possible if the Republicans win those 9+ seats they need to get it. If the Democrats are going to defy history, that'll be the mail balloting in California. That'll take a while.
Right. I mean, look, voting in America has changed, and that's not a sign of bad things. It's a sign of reality. It's changed. More early voting, absentee voting, all of it. And that has changed when we find things out. So when you take a total here of leading for Democrats, leading for Republicans, 34 uncalled, what are some of the races that are extremely close that you're focused on?
Let's look at some of them. Look, they run coast to coast, but people at home will know some of these names here. Again, here's the current state of play. Republicans leading in 222. That would be enough if it finishes, but we're not there. So you mentioned uncalled races. So let's come here and look at them. And again, you see right there, Democrats are leading in 21 of these races, Republicans leading in 13. One of the more prominent Republicans who is leading, but just barely in her race, is Lauren Boebert, a Trump acolyte, a very feisty member, you might say, controversial member of the House Republican Conference. She's only ahead by 794 votes. Former Aspen Council member Adam Frisch. This race has been a seesaw in the last 24 hours or so. But Congressman Boebert leading at the moment, about 96% of the estimated vote in. I was going through the map a little bit earlier through the counties. There's some blue counties on this map where there's still some votes out, but there are some reddish too. So this is going to be count the votes and get to the end. And it is likely to end here, Aaron, within the recount range. Now I just want to move out to California for a second. You talk about these uncalled races. I just want to bring up this district here in Central California. David Valadao is one of 2 remaining House Republicans who are part of the impeachment 10. The other is Dan Newhouse, who won re-election up in Washington State. David Valadao right now is ahead by 3,300 votes and change. But look at that. Only 30% of the vote counted. California has a history. It's a lot of mail-in ballots. A lot of mail-in ballots. They can take days and days to count. So he's leading at the moment, a ways to go. Just one more that we're keeping an eye on. People may know this name at home. Let me pop this up here in Southern California. The Democratic progressive Katie Porter. She's very active in committee hearings, asking tough questions about the banking industry, challenging Republicans on many questions. She's leading right now 50.5 to 49.5. Close, a very close lead there with about 60% of the vote in there. Again, the mail-in ballots coming in. So there are prominent members of both parties, coast to coast, where we're still counting votes, and the balance of power hangs in the balance. And the fact, again, the probability is Republicans will get a small majority. The fact that it's a mathematical possibility the Democrats hold on to theirs is striking, given the headwinds in this election.
No, absolutely so. All right, thank you very much to John King. So we're going to go to North Las Vegas in just a moment because we talk about all the different ways people vote. In Nevada, we got a lot more ballots arriving by mail. They're allowed to do so if they come by Saturday. Our Gary Tuchman is there on the ground to talk about the closest races, including the one in Nevada that could tip the scale of power in the Senate. Welcome back to CNN special coverage of Election Night in America continued. Democrats and Republicans are on edge over who will control the House and the Senate. Incredibly, we don't know for sure for either. And today, a top official for Nevada's largest county pushed back on unfounded charges by the former President Trump. The former president calling Clark County's voting system, home of Las Vegas, corrupt. The county's registrar says he is misinformed. Our Gary Tuchman joins me now from North Las Vegas. And Gary, I understand you're expecting another vote batch at some point this evening. Do you know any sense of what that might be? I understand the total outstanding is what, about 125,000?
It's unclear, Aaron, how high that number will get. It's about 120,000, that's the estimate. But what's unique about Nevada is you could send in your mail ballots as long as it's sent by election day, it can arrive by Saturday. So there's an unknown number of ballots in the postal system right now. But we're expecting an election result update later this evening. There are literally tens of thousands of ballots being counted right now in all 17 counties in the state, including inside this building at the Clark County election headquarters. This is by far the most populous county in the state of Nevada. 75% of the population lives here. Here's what we know right now. There are still 50,000 ballots to be counted. Those ballots either have been mailed in or were put in drop boxes on election day. And then there's an additional 13,000 ballots that are either provisional or need to be cured. A lot of people sometimes don't sign their ballots. All they have to do is sign it, and then it can be counted. So there's a possibility of up to 62,000 ballots still to be counted in this one county, in addition to the ballots that get sent in on Friday and Saturday. Now, as you were just mentioning, the former President of the United States, Donald Trump, on his Truth Social app said, quote, Clark County has a corrupt voting system. There's absolutely no evidence of that whatsoever. And the people who run the election department here were very upset about what he said. Listen.
Obviously, he's misinformed 2 years later about the law and our election processes, which ensure the integrity of elections in Clark County and the state. We couldn't go any faster now, even if we wanted to.
Tomorrow's a federal holiday, Veterans Day, but the people inside here, the Clark County Elections Department, will be working like any normal day. Aaron?
All right, thank you very much. Trying to do everything they can to get those votes counted. I want to go to Elizabeth Thompson because she is the editor for the Nevada Independent. She's been looking at the numbers of these races from every angle. And I know, Elizabeth, you and your team know so much about this. So how are you able to help us out here? Just on the basic, right? Gary talking about, right, as long as you mailed it by Tuesday and it arrives by Saturday, it can count. When you look at the past, you look at history, when we know there's 120,000 ballots still outstanding in Nevada, do you think that number changes markedly over the next few days or not?
It very well may. That's the most interesting thing. It's the big question in Nevada is, we know how many mail ballots are in hand that have not yet been counted. We think it's around 110,000, maybe as high as 125,000, as your reporter said there from another location in Las Vegas. We just do not know how much mail is still out there. In addition to that, a complicating factor is we have a high percentage of nonpartisan voters. And also it's clear from the numbers so far that we are seeing a lot of ticket splitting. Voters going for a Republican in one race and a Democrat in another. All of these unknowns make it virtually impossible to predict where we are going to be by this weekend.
It's just really incredible, right? You don't know you don't actually know the denominator. There's ticket splitting. I mean, it's unbelievable when you think about it in this context. So let's put the Senate race and superimpose it on this conversation. Adam Laxalt leads Senator Catherine Cortez Masto right now by 15,867 votes. Now, we'll get a little bit, hopefully another data dump tonight, but the spread right now is less than 2 percentage points. We're estimating 120,000 ballots outstanding. You're saying it could be anywhere from 110 to 125. But when you look at what's been coming in, and you look at the math of what it would take for Catherine Cortez Masto to win or Adam Laxalt to make it impossible for her to win, which way do you think this race is heading?
Yeah, that is the question of the hour, right? Because so much hangs in the balance. Look, the returns that we got this morning showed that Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent, was winning 2-1 in that particular data dump. If that holds for the future, right? The data dump we get later tonight, the one we hope to get tomorrow, maybe two. If she can hold from this point forward at that 2-1 or 65% ratio, she will pull ahead and she will win. But going back to what you and I were just talking about previously, we don't know how many mail ballots have not been received yet. We know where we're at percentage-wise in the rural counties, which run red, versus the urban counties, which of course run blue. But there's still a shadow of doubt here in Nevada, which is why the Nevada Independent has not yet called this race. And I think it may be at least another day before we have the confidence to do so.
Wow, which is it's amazing and important, obviously, that you wait until you know that you're sure. But amazing that we are in this moment. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
You're welcome.
And coming up, the outgoing Republican senator from Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey, will join me. Democrats flipped his seat. The incoming John Fetterman will replace him. We'll discuss whether Trump was to blame. Welcome back to CNN special coverage. Election night in America continued. Control of the House and Senate still hanging in the balance at this hour. Many in the GOP, of course, thought this election would be a big red wave. Many in the Democratic Party did as well. But that is not what has materialized. And now some in the GOP are pointing the finger squarely at former President Trump, who endorsed so many of the candidates on the ballot. Some of his highest profile candidates, including Dr. Oz in Pennsylvania, lost. Joining me now, retiring Republican Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, who just saw Democrats flip his seat. That was the seat at stake that John Fetterman will now occupy. Senator Toomey, thank you so much for being with me. So, as you watched this from a perspective of one, only you really could see this the way you did, right? It was your former seat. You know your state so well. Why do you think Oz lost?
Well, it's actually still my seat for another couple of months, but I get the point. Look, first of all, let me be very clear. I think Dr. Oz ran a very good campaign. I actually think he was a very good candidate in a lot of ways. So the question that I think arises is, why did a good candidate running a good race in what should be a very good environment not prevail in a state like Pennsylvania, which is very, very competitive, always close, or almost always close? And I think a big part of the reason was that at the top of the ticket in the gubernatorial race, we had an ultra MAGA candidate who never appeared to even attempt to expand beyond a hardcore base that was very, very committed to him. But he ended up losing in an epic beatdown.
Yeah, epic.
And it's very, very hard for candidates who are down ballot. And Dr. Oz, so our gubernatorial Republican lost by like 14 points. Dr. Oz kept his race to within 3. It's really hard when that's what's happening. By the way, we had 3 House seats that I thought we had a very good chance of picking up in Pennsylvania. We lost all 3 of those. And again, I think it was a combination of a real problem at the top of the ticket, but also President Trump inserting himself into the race. He came to Pennsylvania, late. I think it was the Saturday before the election.
He rallied with Oz multiple times.
It was never going to be helpful.
Yeah.
He was, Mastriano was his big interest, but still, the point is, we were in a moment, we were in a cycle, we were at a time when it's good for Republicans for the race to be about President Biden, who is not popular, whose policies have failed, and instead, President Trump had to insert himself, and that changed the nature of the race, and that created just too much of an obstacle. And by the way, it's not just Pennsylvania. You look all over the country, there's a very high correlation between MAGA candidates and big losses, or at least dramatically underperforming.
I mean, it is amazing, though, Senator. You look at this.
That's the truth.
You're going through 3 House races, a gubernatorial race, and a Senate seat. 5 crucial races that can be put on the doorstep from your analysis of former President Trump. I mean, that's a pretty terrible record just in your state.
You need to add to that control of the General Assembly in our state capital of Harrisburg. We're probably going to lose control of the State House, which Republicans have had for some time. So this is a huge problem, and I think my party needs to face the fact that if fealty to Donald Trump is the primary criteria for selecting candidates, we're probably not going to do really well.
So is this going to break the Trump fever? I mean, I say it, and I guess incredulously a bit, but I mean, we keep hearing, oh, this will be it, this will be it. Here we are, losses after losses after losses handed to your party. Will that be enough?
So here's my theory on the case, is that there is not going to be one discrete moment at which the fever breaks and Donald Trump becomes irrelevant. That's not likely to happen. What I think is his influence wanes, and a debacle like we had across the country Tuesday night from a Republican point of view accelerates the pace at which that influence wanes. You know, there are some interesting data points already. A year or two ago, if you asked Republican voters, do they consider themselves more traditional Republicans or Donald Trump Republicans, he had a huge lead. That has flipped. And that's telling, I think, and I think that's going to continue.
Well, Senator, I really appreciate your time and you're taking, the time to share your thoughts and the nuance with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Senator Toomey, as he said, is still senator here, of course, until the new year. Everyone's back with me now. So interesting.
Yeah.
And not afraid. Look, he's always been a moderate. He's not afraid to make his point here. But he's talking about if this doesn't break the fealty, what will?
I think he's being too cautious about that. Look, I mean, Pat Toomey, I wouldn't call him moderate. He ran Club for Growth. But he is in the era of Trump. He has stood up to Trump in a principled, moderate way and worked with Joe Manchin on issues. And, been a responsible conservative senator from the Keystone State.
Yes.
Look, I think he called out Trumpism for what it is. It's the toxic mold of American politics when it comes to moderates. And we saw that again last night. But while Toomey deserves a great deal of credit for calling out Trump consistently and saying this guy is a loser for our party, he is a drag on the ticket, there's the underlying assumption that, this fever is going to break slowly, that everything's basically fine, that Trump's an aberration. There's not a lot of evidence for that right now. I think instead there is a moment where Trump is wounded because people recognize how dangerous he is, or divisive he is, and how bad he is for close elections, even in a midterm. But now Republicans have to step up and start filling that void, including and especially folks who want to run for president, because otherwise it will revert to the mean. We've seen this movie before.
Right.
2 weeks after January 6th, Kevin McCarthy went to kiss the ring.
From the grab 'em tape all the way on. I mean, Joan, it's amazing though, and to me, I like how he, elaborated on what I was saying, right? He's 3 House seats, governor's seat, senator's seat, and he was clear to point out the State House in Harrisburg.
Right.
I mean, that's just like being punched 50 times.
Right.
They lost everything.
No, so the argument you always hear from the MAGA people is, it reminds me of like the salesman who says, sure, we lose money on every sale, but we'll make it up in volume, right? They seem to think that the MAGA candidates, because their passion, their support for them is so intense, it will outweigh the numerical superiority of the people who don't like it. And we saw this in this election. Look, I mean, Joe Biden has every right to celebrate, what happened on election night, but his approval rating, was not good. This was an anti-Trump party coalition more than it was a pro-Biden coalition, at least at the margins. And there were other things going on as well. And so I don't know if it's likely that this spells the end of Trump, but I do know that it hasn't been this possible for a very long time. And it's going to require institutional actors to step up and figure out how to do this. A lot of it depends on how DeSantis handles things. A lot of it depends if Trump announces on the 15th and it looks like it's going to hurt the Georgia runoff, if it's going to hurt Herschel Walker, that could be the kind of thing that erodes even more support for this entire approach to politics.
And instead, I mean, it looks like that is going ahead, this 15th announcement.
Yeah, it does look like it's going ahead, and I do think it'll be interesting to see what the response is to that. We know that before Election Day happened, Donald Trump was basically looking at all of the Republican the Republican leaders to see if they were going to pre-endorse him for 2024. They thought that this was going to be a coronation after a Republican wave driven by Donald Trump that would lead him directly to the nomination. I think we are already seeing that that's not going to happen. Even if he does announce on the 15th, there is a lot of other Republican candidates that see this as their window. The problem is if the base, if the voter is with them, because Donald Trump did not make these people, make his voters believe, and he wasn't dictating beliefs. They actually reflected a lot of those beliefs. I think it's out of election denialism. So
there is a truth. Yeah, you can't sell somebody something they don't want to buy.
Absolutely. Right? So will those new candidates that come up out of this, will they reflect those same grievances that Donald Trump has, or will they try to pivot in a different, more moderate type of way? Well, that's still open to question.
And he'll be making that announcement in Mar-a-Lago in Florida the lone site of the great Republican victory, such that there was one in this cycle, which was Ron DeSantis' reelection.
Yeah, I'm not one for giving Republicans political advice, but I will say, I think that if Donald Trump announces, to John's point, and there are other candidates that step up, the more that step up, the better Donald Trump's chances are, because you say 30% of the Republican Party, I still think are MAGA Republicans, extreme MAGA Republicans. I mean, they still did vote for some of these candidates, and
Yes,
some
they
of them
did.
still
Yes,
did win and could still win.
Yes.
So you have that part of the base, and then if you get a Kemp, a Youngkin, an Abbott, a DeSantis, 70% of your party might split four ways, and then does Trump prevail?
You just set up a debate stage right there.
I did.
All right, all, of course, going to be staying with us as we continue our coverage. We're waiting to learn which party does get control of the House, and for updates out of Nevada and Arizona. The GOP race for Speaker is already underway. The backroom dealing is underway. Inside reporting from Capitol Hill next. Tonight, new reporting from our Manu Raju about the power struggle beginning to brew on Capitol Hill around the speakership. Okay, so right now, yes, it is true. Control of the House is still up in the air, but the GOP is preparing to win it. That's what they think is going to happen, and they're jockeying for the top spot. So if the GOP wins, it would be by an extremely slim majority, though. That will not make it easy for Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and his drive to become Speaker of the House. Manu Raju is at the Capitol tonight. So, Manu, these are the machinations that when we see the outcome, right, this is the function machine where when we come out of it with a speaker, if it is a Republican House, will be crucial to all Americans, to how legislation goes in this country. What are you learning about what's happening behind closed doors tonight?
Well, a hard-right faction of the House Republican Conference has been meeting all day behind closed doors, and part of their discussion has been exactly how to deal with the speaker vote that is coming up. Next week, there will be a first vote. That is when they will nominate their candidate for speaker. And that vote Kevin McCarthy just needs a majority of House Republicans to support the nomination. But the key vote is in January, and that's where McCarthy would need 218 votes on the House floor in order to become Speaker. And that is why the margin is so significant. With a narrow House majority, just a handful of defections could be enough to scuttle or complicate McCarthy's bid to become Speaker. And in speaking to a number of these conservatives, they are holding out their support for Kevin McCarthy because they want him to commit to a number of rules changes, some of which would give them power to essentially oust a sitting Speaker if they don't agree with what he is doing on the floor. Now, Scott Perry, who is a member of the House Freedom Caucus, indicated to reporters just moments ago that he is not committing yet in supporting McCarthy's speaker bid.
We're supporting any leadership team or any members that wish to be a part of leadership that are interested in members, more fairness for members, and a more member-driven conference, as opposed to a leadership-driven top-down strategy. That's what we're supporting. That's what we're looking for. So we're not excluding anybody. We're saying anybody that's interested in doing that, we're interested in having a conversation with everybody.
Now, other Republicans were more explicit, including Bob Good of Virginia, who said, quote, there will be a challenge to McCarthy for Speaker. Some others also indicated that McCarthy simply does not have the 218 votes. That's what Chip Roy, a congressman from Texas, saying no one currently has 218 votes to currently become Speaker, meaning that McCarthy's work is cut out for him. He's been behind closed doors, talking to members, reaching out to them, sending his allies all across the conference to try to lock down support. His team is still confident that he will get there, but he has some work ahead of him. Aaron.
All right, Manu, thank you very much. And I want to go now to the Republican who took one Democrat out of the leadership picture entirely, defeating him at the polls. The winner of New York's 17th Congressional District, Michael Lawler, narrowly unseating Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney. It was significant. Maloney obviously has been in Congress for a long time, and he was also the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, responsible for getting Democrats elected. So the Congressman-elect Lawler joins me now, and I appreciate your time. So you just heard Manu Raju reporting about the speakership that may be up for grabs in the House if Republicans do indeed have this win. Do you plan to support Kevin McCarthy as Speaker?
Yes, I will be supporting Kevin McCarthy. I think in my race in particular, I can tell you He was extremely supportive. He came and campaigned with me and for me. And, I'm a big believer, you stick with who brought you to the dance. And I will be supporting him.
Well, it's good to hear a clear answer, and I'm sure he's glad to hear that there is still some loyalty in this world. I want to ask you about your win, because it was significant, Congressman-elect. You have defeated Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, who actually was in charge of getting congressional Democrats elected. Republicans did flip a number of Democratic House seats in New York, right? So the governorship stayed Democratic, but some of these House flips to Republicans in New York State, many are saying could be responsible for the GOP taking control of the House if that indeed happens. Why did the Democratic Party miscalculate in New York?
Well, the Democrats have nobody to blame but themselves, and especially Sean Maloney. Back in January of this year, he sent a memo to state Democrats demanding that they gerrymander New York's congressional maps and knock Republicans down to 3 members. They did that, and ultimately a Democrat-appointed Court of Appeals threw out the maps, ruling them unconstitutional and gerrymandered, and appointed a special master to draw a fair set of maps. And that's exactly what we got, and why on Tuesday, New York voters elected 4 new Republican members and driving our total to 11, which is the highest in years. And so there'll be 11 Republicans going down to Washington in January, and ultimately that will be the decisive factor in Republicans taking back control of the House.
Which is, I think important to say, right, when you talk about New York, seen as a deep blue state, and Kathy Hochul did retain that, the governorship, obviously, by a small margin, but still she won. We've talked a lot about Trump, whether he's going to run in 2024, and his role in what were and has been so many defeats for your party on this election cycle. Would you support his candidacy if he indeed announces he's going to run?
Look, the former president will make his decision whether or not he will run, and ultimately the voters, both within a Republican primary and obviously a potential general election, will decide. I think the issue here for me is obviously the challenges that we're facing as a country. And they are great. I mean, right now, one-party rule has created a mess. And my objective is to go to Washington to deal with those challenges, whether you're talking about inflation, whether you're talking about crime, whether you're talking about our porous southern border or our energy crisis. And the challenges, obviously, across the globe in Ukraine and beyond. So that's my focus. And I think the politics of 2024 will certainly play itself out in the coming days and months ahead.
They certainly will. And it's going to be a choice you're going to have to make. You're going to have to publicly make it. I mean, I guess the bottom line is, do you, if Trump announces, do you want it just to be his? Do you want it just to be the coronation? He's the guy? Or would you prefer somebody else?
Look, as I've said earlier today, I mean, I think obviously there are a lot of rising stars within the party. Ron DeSantis had a great night the other night. I think as we move forward, I'd like to see, new voices in the process. But again, ultimately, the voters in the Republican primary and or obviously the general election are going to be the ultimate and final say in this process.
All right, Congressman-elect Lawler, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
And still ahead, more than 100,000 votes still waiting to be counted in Nevada's tight Senate race. We believe 120,000 or so, but we don't yet know because some are still in the mail. We're going to break down what we do know about how different groups are voting next. All right, our special coverage of election night in America continues. As we mentioned earlier, CNN estimates about 120,000 votes remain to be counted in Nevada. 84% of votes are already in, and it is a race that is too tight to call. In the Senate, Republican Adam Laxalt has about 15,000 votes as a lead over Catherine Cortez Masto, the incumbent. Back with me now, CNN political director David Chalian. So, David, as we wait, and we're going to be waiting for a while, possibly in Nevada, what can you glean from the exit polls?
Well, before I get to the exit polls, I just want to give you, Aaron, a little bit of information about what you were just saying about the outstanding vote. So you noted we have about 120,000 votes outstanding in Nevada. And then our decision desk does a calculation here that is an estimate. So what would Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democratic incumbent, need of the remaining 120,000 or so votes outstanding in order to overtake Laxalt and win? Right now, our calculation is that Cortez Masto would need 53 to 56% of that outstanding vote in order to secure victory. Now, obviously, Laxalt is ahead in this race, so he would need a lower percentage. He only needs about 41 to 44% of the remaining votes. So when we get the updates from Nevada, look to see how the votes split and if the candidates are within range of what they need to win.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? When you see how they're coming in too, when you become mathematically sure of which way it will go. So what do the exit polls tell you about the demographic breakdown? Who's voting and where they're voting from in the Nevada Senate race?
Yeah, Aaron, and I think this explains why it's such a close race. Take a look. We took a look at young voters, 18 to 29-year-olds. How are they? They make up about 12% of the overall electorate, a little smaller of a share than 2 years ago, but split. Cortez Masto 64%, Laxalt 31%. That's about what we saw Biden-Trump when Biden won this state. But senior votes, take a look, 65 and older, they make up a much larger share of the electorate, 32% of the electorate. And you see Laxalt is winning them 56% to 42%. Obviously, Latino voters are key in the state of Nevada. They make up about 12% of the electorate. Again, a smaller share than the 17% they made up 2 years ago. Cortez Masto winning them, though, 62% to 33%, right on target of what Biden was doing with the Latino vote when he won the state. White voters with a college degree, 26% of the electorate. And look at this even split. I mean, this is 51% Laxalt, Cortez Masto 48%. That is a really slight edge, but one that may be helping Laxalt in his current position. White voters with no college degree, sort of the Trump base of an electorate, you see Laxalt winning them going away, 62% to 35%. They make up 41% of the electorate, Aaron.
All right. Thank you very much, David Chalian. And in just minutes, we are expecting to hear an update from the Arizona race. Election officials in Maricopa County going to be speaking live. Hundreds of thousands of votes there are still uncounted. And the outcome in Arizona, as well as Nevada, obviously could determine the fate of the U.S. Senate. Our special coverage continues after this.